Her name was on the wedding program. Amara Bennett, bridesmaid, beloved sister. But when Serena handed her the bridesmaid dress 3 days before the ceremony, emerald green satin, deliberately ordered 2 sizes too small. She did it in front of their mother, in front of their Aunt Patricia, in front of everyone gathered in that living room. She held it up against Amara's body and tilted her head like she was examining something she'd found at a discount rack. "I ordered your size," Serena said. "Maybe you should have thought about that before eating your feelings all year." Their mother laughed. Not loud, just enough. And nobody said a word. If that was you, standing in your own family's living room while they measured your worth by the inches of fabric that wouldn't close around your body, what would you have done? Would you have walked out? Would you have finally said everything you'd been swallowing for 20 years? Or would you have done what Amara did, folded that dress over your arm, said, "I'll make it work," and gone home to cry alone in your car? This is her story. And before it's over, you're going to feel every word of it. If you've ever been used by the people who were supposed to love you, stay until the very end, because this one doesn't end the way they planned. Hit that like button, drop your city or country in the comments so I can see how far this story has traveled, and subscribe so you never miss what's coming next. The stories we tell here? They don't let go of you easy. Now, let's begin. But the dress didn't zip. Amara stood in the cramped church bathroom 2 hours before her sister's wedding ceremony, both arms wrenched behind her back, fingers working the zipper pull with the focused desperation of someone diffusing something. The fluorescent light above the mirror buzzed and flickered in that particular way that made everything look worse than it already was. She could hear the bridesmaids down the hall, her sister's college friends, women she'd met exactly twice, laughing about something. Their voices carried easily. They weren't trying to be quiet. She got the zipper up another half-inch before it stopped. Hard. Final. Amara let her arms drop. She stood there looking at herself in the mirror for a long moment. The dress was a color that should have been beautiful. Deep emerald, the kind of green that belonged on magazine covers. But it was pulling across her shoulders and refusing to close at her back, and the boning in the bodice was pressing into her ribs in a way that made breathing an active decision. She'd known the moment she'd tried it on at home that this was intentional. She'd known it the way you know things in your family. Not because anyone admits anything, but because the pattern repeats so many times that eventually it has a name. Serena had smiled when she handed it over. That was the part Amara kept returning to. The smile. She got a safety pin from her kit. She'd brought a kit, because she always brought a kit, because she was the one people called when things went wrong, and secured the back gap as best she could. It wouldn't survive dancing. It might not even survive sitting. But it would get her through the ceremony, and getting through the ceremony was the whole job today. That was what she told herself. She checked her lipstick. She straightened her shoulders. She walked back out into the hallway. The bridesmaids glanced at her when she appeared, and then their eyes slid away, back to each other, back to their phones, back to whatever conversation she'd interrupted by existing. One of them, Kayla, who'd been Serena's roommate at UT, looked at Amara's back for a beat too long before turning away. Amara had felt that look on her skin like a sunburn. She had made the cake herself. 5 tiers. Vanilla bean and blackberry preserve filling, cream cheese frosting, handcrafted sugar flowers on every layer, each one individual, each one made by hand over the course of 3 evenings after closing the bakery. The cascade of blooms had taken her 11 hours alone. She'd used a technique she'd been developing for 2 years, the kind of thing that separated her work from every other pastry shop in Houston. Serena had asked for it in January. Not asked, mentioned it at Sunday dinner, the way you mention something you've already decided, while their mother nodded and said, "Your sister would love to do that for you, wouldn't you, Amara?" She had said yes. Of course she had said yes. The conversation about payment had never come. Amara had waited for it, through February and March and April, each time she saw Serena, each time she fielded a text about flavor preferences or flower colors. It never came. And eventually she understood that it wasn't coming, that this was one of those transactions the family conducted where the currency was love, and the exchange rate was always somehow equal to whatever they needed, and zero of what she had spent. The cake retailed for $4,000. She'd done the math once and stopped. She had delivered it this morning at 7 a.m., through the venue's service entrance because that was where the catering coordinator had directed her. She'd unboxed each tier carefully and assembled it in the prep kitchen, then wheeled it on the dolly into the reception hall. The hall was empty at that hour except for the setup crew. She'd positioned it herself, adjusted the final tier by hand, stepped back and looked at what she'd made. It was the most beautiful thing she'd produced in her career. She knew it with the quiet certainty of someone who'd spent 15 years developing a skill and understood exactly what they were seeing. She'd taken one photograph. Then she'd packed up her boxes, returned the dolly, and driven home to get dressed. Serena hadn't texted, not to ask if it arrived safely, not to confirm it looked right. Nothing until 2 hours later. Make sure you're here by 11. Not, thank you. Not, it looked amazing. Just be here by 11. Amara had been there by 10:30, carrying her own dress in a garment bag and her kit in her left hand because nobody had told her where to go, and she'd had to ask the venue coordinator, who'd initially pointed her toward the vendor check-in area before Amara clarified she was family. The coordinator had looked uncertain about that for a moment. Then she'd said, "Oh, the West Wing then. Family's in the West Wing." The ceremony was at 2. By 12:30, the family had gathered in Serena's bridal suite, her mother, both younger sisters, their Aunt Patricia, and 3 of their cousins who'd flown in from Atlanta. The room smelled like perfume and hair product, and the specific anxious warmth of too many women in a small space with opinions about everything. Amara knocked. Someone called out, "Come in," without checking who it was. She pushed the door open with her shoulder and stepped inside. The conversation didn't stop. Not completely. But it stuttered, recalibrated, like a radio station adjusting frequency. Her mother looked up from where she was sitting at the vanity watching the hairstylist work on Serena's updo. "You made it," her mother said. The tone was neutral in the way that neutral is a choice. "Of course," Amara said. She found a space near the window and stood there. One of her cousins, Maya, gave her a genuine smile and said, "You look good, Amara." And Amara felt the warmth of it like something she'd been cold without for a long time. She smiled back. Serena caught her eye in the mirror. "I thought you said you'd have it altered," Serena said. Everyone looked at the dress, at the gap at the back that the safety pin was holding closed. "The alterations place was booked," Amara said. "I made it work." "It's a little," Serena started. "Serena," their Aunt Patricia's voice was short. "It's your wedding day. Let it go." Serena let it go. But she looked at Amara in the mirror for another beat, and Amara understood the look. It was the same one she'd been getting her whole life. Not quite disgust, not quite pity. Something that lived between them. Something that said, "You always find a way to make things complicated." Amara turned toward the window. Outside, the Grand View estate grounds were still being set up. Garden chairs in rows, white fabric on the arbor, florists making their last adjustments to the arrangements. Houston in June was hot enough that the heat shimmered off the stone paths, but from up here it looked peaceful, orderly. She thought about the cake downstairs, about the 11 hours on the sugar flowers. She pressed the thought flat and left it alone. The ceremony was lovely. Amara knew it was lovely because she watched it from the 3rd row on the family side, behind her cousins from Atlanta, partially blocked by her Aunt Patricia's hat. And even from there, the light through the venue's floor-to-ceiling windows was beautiful, and Serena did genuinely look radiant, and the vows they were fine. They were the kind of vows that sounded like they'd been workshopped, but that was what people did now. And Marcus, the groom, had teared up when he saw Serena, and that part at least felt real. Amara had clapped. She had smiled when she was supposed to smile. She had held it together through the entire thing, right up until the photographer started organizing the family for portraits. It happened fast. That was the part she couldn't quite reconstruct clearly afterward. How quickly it moved from everyone gathered around the arbor to just the immediate family to her mother's hand on her arm, low and quiet, steering her sideways out of the frame. "Wait over there, baby," her mother said. The baby was the part that made it worse, somehow. That softening that wasn't softness. "Mom, the photos will take a while. It'll be easier if—" "I'm immediate family," Amara said. She kept her voice even. She'd had a lot of practice keeping her voice even. Her mother's expression did something that Amara had also seen many times. A tightening. A decision being made behind the eyes. Your father and I talked about it, she said. It's Amara. You know how you photograph. You know how you feel about pictures. And there it was, dressed up as consideration, wrapped in the language of care. You know how you feel about pictures, meaning we've decided this is for your benefit. Meaning we've decided what you want so you don't have to want it. Meaning we have removed you from our wedding photographs and we are telling you it's a kindness. Amara stood there for 3 full seconds, long enough that her mother started to turn away. I made the cake, Amara said. Her mother paused. We know, and it's beautiful. I made the cake, Amara said again. I delivered it at 7 this morning. I drove 40 minutes in a service van. I assembled it in a kitchen where nobody knew my name. I came back here and I put on this dress that doesn't fit because it was ordered wrong. I sat in a row behind Patricia's hat, and I watched my sister get married, and I was happy for her. I was actually happy for her. Her voice was starting to lose its evenness. She could hear it. And now you're asking me to stand over there. Her mother's face had gone careful. Amara? Where? Where exactly? Amara looked around. Over by the bushes? Near the vendor tables? Where is the spot you've picked for me? You're making a scene. I'm asking a question. Her father appeared then, from somewhere behind Serena's wedding party. He was wearing his good suit, navy, the one he wore to church and funerals. And his face had the expression she'd spent her whole childhood trying to interpret, the one that never quite resolved into something she could hold on to. Come on now, he said. The come on now meant stop. It meant you are embarrassing us. It meant not here. Am I in the photos? Amara asked him directly. He looked at her mother. Her mother looked at the photographer, who had suddenly found something very interesting to adjust on his camera. Her father said, We'll take some after, just the 2 of us with you. After. After meant never. She knew that. She'd lived in after her whole life. Something in her chest made a sound she couldn't describe. Not breaking. She'd heard breaking. This was different. This was quieter, like a hinge finally wearing through. She nodded once. She walked away from them. She found the nearest door and went through it and kept walking until she was outside, on a side terrace that looked out over the estate's rear garden, away from the ceremony, away from the photographer and the arbor and the white fabric and the event that had eaten the last 4 months of her life. The June heat hit her like a wall. She sat down on a stone bench at the edge of the terrace, her safety pin held. The dress stayed closed. She sat there in the heat in a dress that didn't fit, and she was 34 years old, and she was a skilled pastry chef whose work was 2 rooms away being photographed by people who didn't know her name, and she had spent her entire adult life trying to earn something from people who had decided before she was old enough to understand decisions that she was not quite worth the full cost of love. She took out her phone. She had 12 contacts she could have called in that moment. Friends from the bakery, her supplier Marcus, her neighbor Doreen, who was 72 and kept an eye on the shop when Amara traveled. People who liked her. People who would have answered. She scrolled past all of them. She stopped at a name she'd saved simply as Jae-min because she hadn't known what else to call him when she'd added it, 7 months ago, after he'd come to her shop for the 3rd time in 2 weeks and stayed for 2 hours discussing the difference between French and Italian meringue with the focused attention of someone who actually wanted to know. She stared at the name for a long moment. Then she pressed call. It rang twice. Amara. His voice came through the speaker and she felt her throat close. He said her name differently from other people. Not like a fact. Like something he'd been keeping safe. She opened her mouth to say something composed. Something that conveyed the situation without embarrassing her further. Some version of, I'm at my sister's wedding and I'm having a moment and I just needed to hear a familiar voice. What came out instead was almost nothing. Just her breath catching. And then, can you come get me? A pause. Not a long one. She heard something in the background on his end. Voices. The sound of a chair. And then it went quiet, like he'd stepped away from wherever he was. Where are you? He said. Grandview Estate, off Memorial Drive. I'm outside on the... There's a terrace on the south side, I think. The garden side. Another pause. This one felt different. She couldn't name what was in it. Are you hurt? He asked. No. She pressed her free hand flat against her knee. No, I'm sorry. I don't know why I called. Amara. His voice was even, not cold, even. The way someone sounds when they're being deliberate. "I'm coming." He hung up before she could say anything else. She sat with her phone in her hand and looked out at the garden. The florists had finished their work. The arrangements were perfect, pale roses and eucalyptus in the heat, already beginning to wilt slightly at the edges. In an hour, the reception would move out here, and there would be music and toasts and her sister's cake, her cake, being sliced for 300 guests who would eat it and say how lovely and put their plates down and forget about it. She thought about that for a while. Then she put her phone in the small beaded clutch her mother had picked out for her. The clutch was the right size, at least. And she sat there in the June heat and waited. She didn't go back inside. She didn't fix her lipstick or straighten her safety pin or prepare herself to explain to anyone where she'd been. She just sat. And somewhere on the other side of Houston, a man in a black suit said something quiet to the men around him, stood up from wherever he'd been sitting, and walked to the door. He had said he was coming. She had learned over 7 months of knowing Kang Jae-min that he did not say things he did not mean. He arrived in 22 minutes. She knew because she'd been watching the time on her phone, the way you watch something when you have nothing else to hold on to. Not obsessively, just steadily, the numbers turning over while the heat pressed down and the sound of the reception starting up inside bled through the venue walls. Distant music. The pop of a champagne cork. Someone laughing too loud at something that probably wasn't that funny. 22 minutes from a phone call made in desperation to 3 black vehicles turning through the Grandview Estate's main gate, with the particular unhurried certainty of people who did not need to rush because rushing implied someone could stop them. Amara heard them before she saw them. The gravel under the tires made a sound that was different from the catering vans and the florist trucks and the cars that had been coming and going all day. Lower. More deliberate. She stood up from the stone bench without deciding to stand, the way your body sometimes acts before your brain finishes the sentence. The first vehicle pulled around toward the south terrace, then the second, then the third. The doors opened and men stepped out in a way that was so synchronized it looked choreographed, except it wasn't. It was just training, habit, the particular muscle memory of people who'd done this enough times that their bodies knew the geometry without being told. 4 of them took positions without a word exchanged, and then the rear door of the center vehicle opened and Kang Jae-min stepped out into the June heat of a Houston wedding estate like he was stepping into a room he already owned. He was wearing a black suit. She'd never seen him in anything else when it mattered. He found her immediately. She was standing at the edge of the terrace in an emerald dress with a safety pin at her back and mascara that had not quite made it through the last 22 minutes intact, and he looked at her the way he always looked at her, like the looking itself was something he'd decided to do, a choice he was remaking each time. He crossed the terrace in 10 steps. "You're not hurt," he said. It wasn't a question. He was confirming what she'd told him on the phone, running his eyes over her once with the focused efficiency of someone checking inventory. "I told you I wasn't." "You also said you didn't know why you called." He stopped in front of her. This close, she could see the faint line of tension along his jaw, the thing he did when he was working to keep his expression neutral. "Those 2 things together mean something. Jae-min, tell me what happened." She almost deflected. She had a whole library of deflections she'd built up over the years. "It's nothing. It's fine. It's just family stuff. You know how it is." And she opened her mouth to pull one out. What came out instead was, "They cut me out of the photos." He didn't react visibly. That was the thing about him that had taken her months to understand. His stillness wasn't absence of feeling. It was the opposite. It was everything compressed down to a very controlled point. "The wedding photos," he said. "My parents. My mother pulled me out of the frame, said it would be easier, said I know how I feel about pictures." Her voice was doing the thing she hated, the slight elevation that meant she was closer to the edge than she wanted to be. She made it sound like she was doing me a favor. "Where are they now?" "Inside." Reception started. She gestured vaguely at the venue. "The cake is in there. My cake. $4,000 of work I did for free because it's family, and you do things for family." She stopped, pressed her lips together. "I'm sorry. I'm aware this is not your problem. You called me." "I know." "You called me," he repeated. "So it is now by definition something I am here for." He said it without inflection, like it was a point of simple logic, and somehow that was the thing that made her eyes sting worse than anything her mother had said in the last 6 hours. She looked away from him, out at the wilting roses. "My parents are selling their house," she said. "They told me this morning before the ceremony. I have 30 days to find somewhere else." That landed differently. She saw it in the slight shift of his weight. "They told you this morning," he said, "before the ceremony." "My mother pulled me aside when I was dropping off the cake. Said they've been thinking about it for a while. Said the house is too big, they want to downsize. It makes sense," she exhaled. "Said I was 34 and it was time. Time. Time to be somewhere else. Live my life. Get out." She kept her voice flat. She said it nicer than that. She used words like independence and your own space. But the thing underneath the words was, "You're too much. You cost too much. Not money, just..." She pressed her hand against her sternum, against the boning that had been digging into her ribs for 6 hours. "Just existing, just being the size I am, and being in their house, and reminding them of whatever it is I remind them of." Jae-min was quiet for a moment. "How long have you been living there?" he asked. "I moved back 3 years ago when the bakery was struggling. I was going to stay 6 months. She laughed, and it came out wrong. 3 years. He nodded once, slowly. The processing kind of nod, not the dismissive kind. There was a difference. "Stay here," he said. She blinked. "What?" "Don't go back inside yet." He looked past her toward the venue entrance. "I want to get you water. You've been out here in this heat. Jae-min, you don't have to..." "Amara." He said her name like a period. Not unkind, just final. "Let me get you water." He turned toward one of his men and said something brief. The man moved immediately toward the venue. Amara sat back down on the stone bench because her feet had been hurting since 10 in the morning, and she was tired in a way that had nothing to do with hours slept. The water arrived. Then the trouble did. She heard her sister's voice first, that specific pitch Serena used when she was performing composure, the one that was too controlled to be actually calm. Amara looked up, and there was Serena in her wedding dress, veil gone, flowers still in her hand, standing at the terrace door with Marcus 2 steps behind her, and an expression on her face that tried for concerned and landed somewhere colder. "What is going on?" Serena said, not a question. She'd seen the vehicles. Of course she had. 3 black SUVs in your wedding venue's drive were not easy to miss. Her eyes moved from Amara to Jae-min, and something shifted in her face. The calculation was almost visible. Who is this? What does he mean? What does his being here say about my wedding day? "I'm fine," Amara said. "I just needed some air." "You've been out here for 40 minutes. Serena stepped onto the terrace. "People are asking where you are. Mom is..." She stopped, looked at Jae-min again. "Who is this?" "A friend," Amara said. "A friend." Serena's eyes traveled over him with the particular efficiency of someone who'd grown up around money and knew what it looked like. The suit, the men at the perimeter, the vehicles. "Amara, the reception is happening. The cake is being cut. You're supposed to be..." "I know what I'm supposed to be," Amara said. "I was outside because I needed a minute." "You needed a minute," Serena's voice sharpened. "It's my wedding day." "I know." "You're a bridesmaid. You have responsibilities." "Serena," Marcus put a hand on his new wife's arm. He was a decent man. Amara had always thought so, with the slightly helpless quality of someone who loved a woman without fully understanding the territory he'd married into. "Maybe let her..." "Don't," Serena said to him, quiet and total. He went quiet. She looked at Amara. "I know today has been hard for you," she said. The tone had shifted into something that felt like generosity and wasn't. "I know you have feelings about things, but this is my day, and I would really appreciate it if you could just, for one day, not make everything about you." The terrace went very still. Amara felt Jae-min move, not towards Serena, just a slight redistribution of weight, like something settling into place. "Not make everything about me," Amara repeated. "You know what I mean?" "I do," Amara said. "I think I do, actually." She set the water bottle down on the bench beside her. "You mean that I built your wedding cake for 4 months and delivered it at 7 this morning through the service entrance? You mean that I put on a dress you ordered 2 sizes too small and secured the back with a safety pin and sat 3 rows behind Patricia's hat and watched you get married and clapped when everybody else clapped? And when Mom pulled me out of the family photos, I walked away without saying a word. And I came outside by myself, and I called someone I trust, and I have been sitting on this bench." She paused. "Which of those things is the part where I made it about me?" Serena's jaw tightened. "That dress was ordered wrong," Amara said. "You know it was ordered wrong. I ordered your size." "You ordered the size you wanted me to be." The words came out even, clear, like something she'd finally allowed herself to see the shape of. "There's a difference." Marcus looked at the ground. One of the security men near the perimeter coughed once into his fist. Serena's face went through several things in rapid succession. Amara had known her sister's face for 30 years. The architecture of it, under stress, the way the eyes went harder, right before the voice got sweeter. "I cannot believe," Serena said, very quietly, "that you would do this today. I'm sitting on a bench outside. With—" Serena gestured at Jae-min, at the vehicles, at the men. "All of this, you brought all of this to my wedding." "I called someone to come get me," Amara said. "I didn't brief him on the guest list first. I'm sorry." "Who is he?" Serena looked directly at Jae-min now. "What is your name?" Jae-min looked at Serena for a moment. His expression was the one Amara privately thought of as the waiting expression. Entirely patient, entirely unimpressed. "Kang Jae-min," he said. Something moved through Serena's eyes. Maybe she recognized the name. Maybe she just recognized the tone of someone who gave their full name without apology and expected that to be the end of it. "And what exactly is your relationship with my sister?" Serena asked. "That's between Amara and me," he said. Serena turned back to Amara. "This is who you've been seeing. Amara, do you even know who this person is? Do you know what people say?" "I know him," Amara said, steady. "I know him better than you know anyone you've put in front of me and called an introduction. He runs—" Serena stopped herself, looked around at the men, recalibrated. "He's not someone you should be associated with." "And yet here we are," Amara said. "Well, their mother came through the terrace door 7 minutes later with the particular energy of someone who had been told something alarming and had organized themselves around managing the situation before fully processing it. Amara Bennett was 61 and had spent 40 of those years being someone who handled things. She had strong opinions about presentation and a talent for conducting entire difficult conversations while smiling. She came through the door in her mother of the bride dress, pale gold, silk, and she took in the scene with one sweep of her eyes, and her face arranged itself into something diplomatic. "Amara, sweetheart." She came toward her like she was approaching something that might bolt. "What's happening out here?" Marcus says, "Hi, Mom." Eleanor's eyes found Jae-min, stopped there. "And you are?" she asked. "This is Jae-min," Amara said. "He's a friend. I called him." "You called him." Eleanor processed this. "During your sister's reception." "After your husband told me the photos would be better without me in them," Amara said. "After that?" Eleanor's expression did something complex, a slight flinch that she recovered from immediately. "Your father was trying to avoid—" "I know what he was trying to avoid," Amara said. "He was trying to avoid the photograph looking like something he didn't want it to look like." "Amara, oh, Mom." Her voice came out tired, just tired, all the way down. "It's okay. I'm done arguing about it. I understand. I've been understanding for 34 years. I'm very good at understanding by now." Eleanor looked at her for a moment. Then, with the precision of someone who knew exactly what they were doing, she shifted her attention entirely to Jae-min. "I don't know what my daughter has told you," she said, "but family matters are private matters." "I agree," he said, "generally." "Then perhaps this is something we discuss inside, as a family." "I was asked to leave the family photograph," Amara said. "I'll stay out here." "Don't be dramatic." The word dramatic landed like a heel on a bruise. Amara had been hearing it her whole life, when she cried, when she objected, when she pointed out things that were being done to her. "You're so dramatic. You always make things dramatic. Why do you have to be so dramatic about everything?" "Inside," Eleanor said to Amara, with the quiet finality of someone who'd been issuing directions for 40 years and expected them to be followed. Amara didn't move. That was new. Eleanor looked at her daughter with something shifting in her eyes. Surprise, maybe, or the first edge of something she didn't have a name for yet. "I need to talk to you," Amara said. "You and Dad, but not inside. Not in front of 300 people. Out here. This is not the time. You told me this morning that I have 30 days to leave your house, Amara said. Her voice was steady in the way a structure is steady right before the weight becomes too much. You told me that today, Mom, before your daughter's wedding ceremony. You pulled me aside while I was unloading a cake I built for free, and you told me I had 30 days. Serena, still standing near the door with Marcus, went very still. We talked about this, Eleanor said quietly. You talked about it, Amara said. You told me. There wasn't a we. Serena looked at their mother. You told her today? This was not... The timing wasn't... Eleanor stopped, composed herself. We had agreed. You agreed, Amara said. You and Dad. You'd have decided. That's different. She stood up from the bench. Standing up felt important. I want to know something. I want to know when you decided. Was it before you asked me to make the cake? Because I'd like to understand the sequence. The silence that followed had texture to it. That's not related, Eleanor said. It's related to me, Amara said. I would like to know if you asked me to make a $4,000 cake while you already knew you were going to ask me to leave, Marcus said under his breath. Jesus. Serena said nothing. Eleanor's composure held, but it held the way something holds when the pressure on it has exceeded what it was built for, visibly, carefully, with effort. Your father will be out in a moment, she said. We can discuss this as a family. I'm asking you, Amara said, not as a family. I'm asking you as your daughter. Eleanor looked at her. Something moved through her face, not guilt exactly. Something older and more complicated than guilt. The look of someone who had made decisions they'd stopped examining a long time ago because examining them would require changing something they didn't want to change. We've always supported you, Eleanor said. We let you move back in. You let me, Amara said. We opened our home. I paid rent, Amara said. For 2 of the 3 years. I paid rent and I fixed the water heater and I made your anniversary dinner and Serena's engagement party desserts. And I drove Dad to his cardiology appointments every other Thursday for 8 months. Serena was looking at her mother now. Amara, Eleanor started, did you ask me to make the cake after you decided to sell the house? The pause before her mother answered was 3 seconds long. Amara counted them. The timing was, yes or no, Mom. Eleanor Bennett straightened her shoulders and looked her oldest daughter in the eye and said nothing, which was, in its own way, the answer. Something in Amara's chest made that sound again. The hinge sound. The one that wasn't quite breaking, but was something that could not be walked back from. She became aware very suddenly of Jae-min standing 3 feet behind her, not intervening, not speaking, just present, the way a wall is present when you need something solid at your back. She had called him, and he had come, and he had stood here and let this happen at exactly the right distance. Close enough to matter, far enough to let her do what she needed to do. She'd spent 34 years in this family, being managed, redirected, softened down into something easier to accommodate. And she had called someone tonight who had driven 22 minutes across Houston and parked 3 vehicles in a wedding venue drive and stood on a terrace in the June heat because she'd asked him to come, and he had come. She thought about that. She looked at her mother. I'll have my things out in 30 days, Amara said. I'll be gone. Amara, I won't fight about it. Her voice was almost gentle. I want you to know that. I'm not angry. I'm not going to make a scene at Serena's wedding. I'm going to stand here for a minute, and then I'm going to go back inside, and I'm going to smile, and I'm going to watch people eat my cake, and then I'm going to leave. She looked at her mother steadily. But I need you to understand that after I leave tonight, some things are going to be different. I don't know exactly what yet, but some things are going to be different. Her mother opened her mouth. Amara's father appeared in the terrace doorway. Raymond Bennett was 63, a retired high school principal with the bearing of someone who'd spent 30 years being the authority in the room. He came out onto the terrace and read the scene with the speed of someone experienced in crisis management, and his eyes moved from Eleanor to Serena to Jae-min and his men and then to Amara. What's going on? He said. We're talking, Amara said. He looked at Jae-min for a long moment. Who is this? He said. My friend, Amara said. Raymond looked at the 3 black vehicles, at the men stationed at the perimeter with the particular stillness that meant they were not decorative. His jaw worked once. Inside, he said to Amara. Just that. No, she said. The word landed in the hot air between them and just sat there. Raymond Bennett had been telling his oldest daughter inside and enough and not now, and come on now for her entire life. And she had always, eventually, after the internal fight that cost her more each time, done what she was told. He looked at her now with the expression of a man recalibrating. Amara, he said. His voice had dropped. The principal voice. I don't know who this man is, or what you think you're doing bringing him here, but this is your sister's wedding day, and I am telling you, you told me the photos would look better without me, she said. This morning, you told me to move out. You let Mom pull me out of the family photos. She stopped, drew a slow breath. I made Serena's cake. I made it for free. I've been making things for free for this family for 34 years, and I'm tired, Daddy. The daddy came out smaller than the rest, younger, the word she'd used before she'd understood that it wouldn't change anything. I'm just tired. Raymond's face did something she'd never quite seen it do before. The structure of it shifted, some internal arrangement giving way, and for 1 second she could see something underneath the authority and the management and the 30 years of come on now. Something that looked, just for that second, like a man who had made choices about his daughter that he had never been willing to look at directly. Then his eyes moved to Jae-min, and the moment closed. You need to tell your friend to take his cars and his people and leave, Raymond said. This is a private family event. Jae-min said very quietly, she called me. Raymond looked at him. Your daughter, Jae-min said, called me. I came because she asked me to. He let that sit for a moment. I'm going to stay until she tells me to go. Raymond's breathing changed. Amara could see it from where she was standing, the slight expansion of his chest, the deliberate control. Do you know what kind of man you're dealing with? Raymond said to Amara, not to Jae-min, keeping it in the family, or trying to. Yes, she said. Do you? Her father looked at her like she'd said something in a language he didn't know. She spoke. And that was when her mother, standing slightly behind Raymond, made the mistake that changed the shape of the evening completely. Eleanor Bennett opened her purse. She took out her phone, and she said, to no one in particular, with the controlled calm of someone managing an unwanted guest at a social function, I'm going to call security. The terrace went absolutely quiet. Jae-min's expression didn't change. Not a muscle. But one of his men, the one nearest the venue entrance, the one who had brought Amara the water, turned his head very slightly and looked at Jae-min, waiting. Amara looked at her mother, at the phone in her hand. Eleanor Bennett was going to call the venue security on the man her daughter had called for help. At her daughter's sister's wedding, in front of her daughter. Amara felt the last thread of something go. Not violently, not dramatically, just released. Like a knot finally too worn to hold, she said, Don't. Her mother looked at her. Don't call anyone, Amara said. Put the phone away. Amara, put it away, Mom. Something in her voice this time made Eleanor pause. It was the same voice, the same Amara. But there was something underneath it that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had always been there, and this was the first time she'd let it all the way to the surface. Eleanor lowered the phone. The evening air sat on all of them for a moment. Then Raymond said very quietly, This isn't the place. No, Amara agreed. It's not. She picked up her clutch from the bench. She looked at her father, then her mother, then Serena, who had not said a word in 4 minutes, and was looking at Amara with an expression that had started as anger and traveled somewhere else entirely, somewhere with more complicated weather. I'm going to say goodbye to the cousins, Amara said. Then I'm leaving. She walked past her parents, past Serena and Marcus, through the terrace door and back into the cool, controlled air of the Grand View estate, in her safety-pinned emerald dress, carrying a clutch her mother had chosen for her. Behind her, she heard Jae-min say something to his men. Quiet. 2 words. She didn't look back, but she knew, without looking, that he was following. She found Maya first. Her cousin was near the bar at the far end of the reception hall, holding a glass of white wine and talking to one of Marcus's groomsmen, laughing at something with her whole face the way Maya always laughed. Unreserved, a little too loud, the kind of laugh that made other people want to be in on the joke. When she saw Amara coming through the crowd, she broke off mid-sentence and moved toward her immediately. reading something in Amara's face that the rest of the room hadn't noticed yet. "Hey!" Maya took her by the arm, pulled her slightly to the side. "What happened? You were gone for almost an hour." "I'm leaving," Amara said. Maya looked at her, then past her to where Jae-min had stopped a careful distance behind, far enough to give her room, close enough that he was still there. Maya's eyes moved over him with the particular assessment of a woman who had grown up in Atlanta and knew how to read a room. "Who is that?" Maya said, low. "His name is Jae-min. He's a friend. A friend who came with 3 cars and 4 men in suits." "Yes." Maya looked at her for another beat. "Are you okay?" "I will be." Amara squeezed her cousin's arm. "I wanted to say goodbye to you before I left. I didn't want to just disappear." "Amara." Maya set her wine glass down on the nearest table. "Talk to me. What happened out there? I saw your mom's face when she came back in. She looked—" "I'll call you tomorrow," Amara said. "I promise. I'll tell you everything. But I can't. I need to get out of here tonight. I need air that doesn't have any of this in it." Maya looked at her for a long moment. Then she pulled her into a hug, the real kind, both arms, no performance in it. She held on for 3 seconds longer than a social hug, and Amara felt the sincerity of it in her sternum. "You call me tomorrow," Maya said into her shoulder. "Not the day after. Tomorrow." "Tomorrow," Amara said. She pulled back. She looked at her cousin's face, open, worried, genuinely there, and felt the familiar arithmetic of her family. Here was the one who had always seen her, buried in a group of people who largely hadn't. She turned and walked toward the exit. She did not look for her parents. She did not look for Serena. She kept her eyes on the doors at the far end of the hall, and she moved through the crowd at a pace that was steady, without being rushed, passing tables decorated with pale roses and eucalyptus, passing guests who were 2 glasses into the evening and radiating the particular warmth of people who were having a good time and not paying attention to anything outside their immediate orbit. She passed the cake table. She stopped for just a moment. It was displayed on a draped table near the window, all 5 tiers intact except for the ceremonial cut Marcus and Serena had made. The small, neat slice removed from the bottom tier, already plated for the photographs. The sugar flowers caught the light from the chandeliers above, each one casting a tiny shadow on the white fondant. The cascade ran from top to bottom exactly the way she'd planned it, and the colors graded from deep violet at the crown to pale blush at the base, which had been Serena's request, and which Amara had spent 2 evenings getting exactly right. 300 people had eaten tonight from tables she hadn't been invited to sit at. She looked at it for 4 seconds. Then she kept walking. But outside, the evening had come in properly. The June heat had lost its sharpest edge, and the sky above Houston was doing the thing it did in summer. That dark blue that wasn't quite night yet, the last light pressed down to the horizon. The parking area was lit with elegant low fixtures, and the gravel was loud under her heels as she walked toward the black vehicles. Jae-min came up beside her without rushing. His security had already redistributed, 2 men ahead, 2 behind, the formation so practiced it happened without any visible communication. "My car is on the lower lot," she said. "I know. We'll have someone drive it." "You don't have to—" "Amara." She stopped walking. He stopped beside her. A faint smell of night-blooming jasmine from somewhere in the estate's garden, incongruous against everything. "Let someone drive your car," he said. "You don't need to be behind a wheel right now." She wanted to argue. She assessed her current state, the tremor in her hands she'd been managing for the last 20 minutes, the tightness behind her eyes that meant she was one wrong trigger from crying, and she didn't argue. "Okay," she said. He said something to the man nearest him and held out his hand to Amara. Not to take her hand, just open, waiting, asking. She put her key fob in his palm. He handed it off, opened the rear door of the center vehicle for her. She got in, and the seat received her, and the air conditioning was cool, and the leather smelled like nothing in particular, which was a relief. He got in on the other side. The door closed. The quiet inside the vehicle was immediate and complete. Outside, the reception continued. She could see light in the venue windows, movement, someone stepping out onto the front portico to make a phone call. Inside the car, it was another country. She let out a breath she had been holding, in some form, since 7 o'clock that morning. "Where do you want to go?" he asked. "Not home," she said. Not my parents' house." "Okay." I don't know where. Somewhere that isn't this. I know a place, he said. He leaned forward slightly and said something to the driver, and the vehicle moved. Amara looked out the window as the Grandview estate receded. The white fabric on the arbor, still lit up, the florist's van still parked near the service entrance, a life she'd spent 3 decades trying to belong to, getting smaller in the window. She thought she would cry. She'd been expecting to cry for the last hour. But what happened instead was stranger than crying. A kind of interior silence, like the moment after something very loud stops and your ears are still adjusting. My father looked at me tonight, she said. Not planning to say it, just saying it. When I told him I was tired, for about 1 second he looked like, I don't know what he looked like someone who knew something he hadn't decided to know yet. She paused. Then he looked at you, and it was gone. Jae-min said nothing. He was watching the road. That's the thing I keep trying to figure out, she said. Whether they know. What they're doing. Whether it's deliberate or whether they've just… She stopped. Whether they love me and are doing it wrong, or whether they genuinely don't see me as worth… She stopped again. I've been trying to figure that out for 30 years. Some things, Jae-min said, don't resolve into one answer. She looked at him. Some things are both, he said. They can love you and still do damage. The damage isn't less real because of the love. She sat with that for a moment. The city moved past outside. Your family, she said. Your parents. My father died when I was 19, he said. My mother is in Seoul. We speak on her birthday and mine. He said it without any particular weight, just the fact of it. I'm sorry. Don't be. It is what it is. He glanced at her. I didn't tell you that to compare. I told you because I understand something about families that function like closed fists. You can love the hand, doesn't make it hurt less when it closes. Amara looked at him for a long moment. You say things sometimes, she said, that are exactly the right thing. Not usually, he said. Tonight is an exception. She almost smiled. It surprised her. He took her to a place she'd never been, a private dining establishment in Midtown that didn't have a sign on the door, just an address, the kind of place that existed for people who wanted to eat well and not be seen doing it. The staff knew him. She could tell by the way they moved when he came in. Not startle, not deference exactly, just a particular attentiveness that meant we were expecting you even though you didn't call. They sat at a table in a back room with one window and no other occupied tables, and a quality of quiet that felt curated. She still had the emerald dress on. The safety pin was still holding. Someone brought water and a menu and disappeared. She ate, eventually. Not much, her appetite had been absent since morning, but enough. Soup, bread, something her body recognized as nutrition and accepted without complaint. Jae-min ate across from her and didn't push conversation and didn't check his phone and didn't do the thing people sometimes did when you were in distress, the slightly performative attending. He just ate. Like they were two people having dinner. It was the most normal she'd felt all day. She was reaching for her water glass when her phone lit up on the table. She turned it face down out of habit. But the vibration was persistent. Not a single notification, but a sequence. Multiple messages coming in rapid succession, the kind of cluster that meant something was spreading. She turned the phone over. The first text was from Maya. Call me. Right now. Don't wait. Below it, 4 more messages from Maya, each one more urgent. Then one from her cousin Denise in Atlanta. Then one from a number she didn't recognize. Then 2 from Marcus. Marcus. Her sister's husband. She looked at the screen. Her stomach dropped before she'd finished reading. She opened Maya's message thread. Amara, I need you to call me. It's about Serena and the bakery. Please call me. It's important. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to say this over text. Text, she looked up at Jae-min. Something happened, she said. He read her face. Call her. She pressed Maya's name. It rang once. Amara. Maya's voice was tight in a way she'd never heard from her. Maya was the steady one, the one who didn't tighten. Are you sitting down? Yes. What happened? I need you to listen to me and not… I need you to just listen before you react, okay? Maya, what happened? A breath on the other end, then… After you left, Serena and your mom got into it. In the hall, not private at all, people were right there. And some things came out. Another breath. Amara, Serena knew about the house. What? She knew your parents were selling. She knew months ago, before she asked you to make the cake. She was in on the conversation about when to tell you. The restaurant went very quiet. Or maybe everything had always been this quiet, and she was only now capable of hearing it. She knew, Amara said. Denise heard everything. She said Serena told your mom that the timing was fine, that you'd be too busy with the cake to think about it too hard, and that by the time the wedding was done, you'd have had time to… Amara, she said you'd have time to accept it, like it was already decided, like you were already managed. Amara's hand was completely still on the phone. She was aware of Jae-min across the table watching her. She was aware of the bread on her plate, and the water glass, and the single window, and the curated quiet of the room. The cake, she said. They use the cake to keep you cooperative, Maya said. I'm so sorry. I don't know how else to say it. They needed you not to make problems before the wedding, and they knew you'd do anything for the family if they asked. How long has she known? Denise says at least 3 months, maybe more. Amara calculated it in her head. 3 months ago, she had been finishing the first round of structural tests on the bottom tier, the engineering work that determined whether a 5-tier cake could support its own weight for a 6-hour event. She had spent 2 evenings on load calculations. She had emailed Serena a photograph of a preliminary sugar flour for color approval, and Serena had responded with a single word, gorgeous. 3 months ago, Serena had known that the house was being sold, had known that her sister was going to be given 30 days, and had texted Gorgeous about a sugar flour. Is there more? Amara asked. The pause on Maya's end told her there was. Tell me, Amara said. When they were fighting, your mom said something about the bakery loan. Amara went very still. What loan? The loan you took out 3 years ago when you moved back in, when the bakery was struggling. I paid that off, Amara said. I paid it off 18 months ago. Your mom said your dad co-signed it. Amara, she said he has documentation suggesting he provided capital investment in Velvet Rose, that he could claim… Maya stopped. I don't know the legal details, but she said the words partial ownership, and Denise heard it clearly. The air in the room changed temperature. Amara's father had co-signed the loan. That was true. 3 years ago, when the bakery had been 6 months from closing and she'd had no credit score strong enough to go it alone, Raymond Bennett had co-signed a bank loan because he was a retired principal with a clean financial record, and she was his daughter, and she had asked him and he had said yes. She had paid it back. Every cent. She had the records. But co-signing and claiming investment capital were different things. And if her father had documentation, if he had kept paperwork, if he had framed it differently in his own records than she had framed it in hers. He can't take the bakery, she said. The words came out like she was testing their weight. I don't know what he can do, Maya said quietly. I'm not a lawyer. But Amara, your mom said it loud enough that I guarantee there are guests who heard it. And I think she said it because she was angry and she wasn't thinking, but the fact that she had it ready to say means someone has been thinking about it. Amara set the phone down on the table, not ending the call, just setting it down. She could still hear Maya's voice. Amara? Amara, are you there? Coming from the small speaker in a thin, distant thread. She looked at Jae-min. He had heard enough. His face was completely still. The loan, she said. Her voice came out flat. 3 years ago, when I was about to lose the bakery, my father co-signed a bank loan. I paid it back, all of it. She picked up her water glass, set it down without drinking. Tonight, at the reception, after I left, my mother said my father could claim partial ownership of my bakery based on that cosign. Jae-min's jaw moved once. The bakery, he said. Velvet Rose Patisserie, she said. 15 years. I built it from a cart at the weekend market to a shop with 3 employees and a commercial kitchen. Her voice was even in the way that even is the last thing before something gives. It is the only thing I built that no one in my family helped me plan or diminish or take credit for. It is the only thing that is completely mine. She could hear Maya still, distant, saying her name. She picked the phone back up. I'm here, she said. Amara, what do you want to do? What do you want to do? She had been asked that question so rarely in her life that it still sometimes stopped her. What do you want? What do you actually want? I want to know if it's real, she said. The claim. I want to know if he actually has anything or if my mother said it in anger and there's nothing behind it. How do you find that out tonight? I don't, she said. I find that out with a lawyer. She pressed her palm flat on the table. Maya, how many people heard her? I don't know, 6, 10. Denise said people were definitely listening. Okay, she breathed. Okay, I'm okay. I'll call you tomorrow. Amara, see, I'm okay, she said again. I'm with someone. I'm not alone. I'll call you tomorrow. She ended the call. She sat with her hands flat on the table for a moment. Outside the window, the midtown night was doing what cities do. Indifferent and continuous, its rhythms entirely uninterested in the collapse of small private worlds. My father, she said. He might try to claim ownership of my bakery. Jae-min said nothing. He was watching her with complete attention. That loan, he co-signed it. I paid it back, every payment, on time, for 18 months. I have bank records. She stopped. But if he claims he made an investment, if he has documentation that frames it differently, if he has a lawyer who can argue, she stopped again. I don't know. I don't know what he has. Do you have your loan documents? At the bakery, on my laptop. Your lawyer. I don't have a lawyer. I have an accountant. I've never needed... She stopped. She had never needed a lawyer because she had never been in a situation where someone might try to take something from her. She had been in situations where people took things, her time, her labor, her money, her confidence. But those things didn't come with paperwork. Those things you just lost. I know someone, Jae-min said. Jae-min? A lawyer, real estate and business. He's handled complex ownership disputes. He said it without advertisement, the way he said most things. He can look at your documents and tell you within 24 hours where you stand. She looked at him. This isn't your problem. You said that on the terrace too, he said. It's true. Amara. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on the table, the most informal posture she'd ever seen from him. You have been the only person in the last 7 months who sat across from me in that bakery of yours and argued with me about the structural superiority of Italian meringue for 45 minutes without once adjusting what you were saying based on how I was responding. She blinked. Most people, he said, when they understand what I do, what I am, they start editing. They say what they think I want. They manage the conversation like they're navigating something dangerous. He held her gaze. You told me I was wrong about the meringue. You told me specifically and in detail why I was wrong. And when I pushed back, you said, and I remember this exactly, I've been doing this for 15 years, and you've been eating pastry for roughly the same amount of time. So let's be clear about whose expertise applies here. She almost laughed. She remembered that conversation. You were irritating, she said. I was testing you, he said. I wanted to see what you'd do. And? You were exactly what you looked like, he said, which is rarer than you'd think. She sat with that for a moment. If my father has a legitimate claim, she said, a legal argument, the bakery could be at risk, not a certainty, but a risk. Yes. And if people heard my mother say it tonight, and if word gets to suppliers, to my bank, we address it before that happens, he said, tomorrow morning. My lawyer, your documents. You understand what you're facing before it becomes something you're reacting to. She thought about Velvet Rose, about the Saturday morning she'd opened the door for the first time with a key that had her name on the lease, about her 3 employees, Danny and Rosa and young Terrence, who was 19 and learning faster than anyone she'd ever trained, about the commercial kitchen she'd designed herself, the cold cases she'd selected, the corner window she'd fought to keep when the landlord wanted to put a wall there and she'd argued him down. About the 11 hours on the sugar flowers for a woman who had known for 3 months that she was going to take the only other thing left. My sister knew, she said. The words came out quiet. She knew the whole time. Jae-min said nothing. I was making her cake. I was in my kitchen every night for 4 months. I sent her progress photographs. She texted me back. She looked at her hands on the table. She knew, and she kept texting back. The weight of it was different from her mother pulling her out of a photograph, different from her father's 30 days to leave. Those things had landed as pain. This landed as something more structural, the kind of discovery that doesn't just hurt, but retroactively changes the meaning of other things. 4 months of work reframed. 4 months of believing she was doing something for someone who was at least honestly asking, even if the asking was thoughtless. But thoughtless and deliberate were not the same thing. Thoughtless you could eventually forgive because there was no intent to hold against anyone. Deliberate was a different architecture. She became aware that her jaw was aching, that she'd been clenching it without noticing. She released it deliberately, moved her shoulders, felt the safety pin at her back, still holding, improbably, and felt something clarify in her that hadn't been clear before. This was not the end of something. This was the part where you find out what's true. And what was true was, her family had managed her. For a long time, in many ways, they had managed her. They had used the particular leverage of people who know they are loved to extract from her the things she built, and the labor she gave, and the patience she stored, and the forgiveness she administered. And they had done it with the confidence of people who believed, perhaps correctly, until tonight, that she would always absorb it and return for more. And they had made one mistake. The one mistake people make when they manage someone for too long. They had gone for the bakery. You could take my time, she thought. You could take my money, my labor, my confidence, my presence in the family photograph. You could order a dress 2 sizes too small and time an eviction notice to land on the morning of a wedding you needed my hands to make beautiful. But you should not have touched the bakery. She looked at Jae-min. Your lawyer, she said. What time can he meet tomorrow? Something shifted in Jae-min's face. Infinitesimal. The thing that happened there when he was making a decision. Whatever time you need, he said. I'll make sure of it. She nodded. She picked up her fork and ate the rest of what was on her plate, deliberately, like someone who had assessed their resources and decided that maintaining physical capacity was now a strategic priority. She drank the rest of her water. She sat straight in the chair that had been accommodating her all evening, in the emerald dress with the safety pin at her back. She thought about 30 days. She thought about 15 years of early mornings and flour on her hands and conversations with suppliers, and the specific satisfaction of getting a glaze exactly right, the way the surface would go from dull to luminous in the space of a degree of temperature. She thought about Serena texting gorgeous at a sugar flower progress photograph, while knowing that in 30 days her sister would have nowhere to live. She thought about her father, who had sat across from her at his kitchen table 18 months ago while she handed him the final loan payment confirmation, printed out in an envelope because he preferred things in writing, and who had taken it and said good girl and gone back to reading his newspaper. She thought about what it meant that a man who had documentation positioning himself as an investor in her business had said good girl when she paid back a loan. She thought about all of this very carefully in the quiet back room of a restaurant that didn't have a sign on the door, across from a man who had driven 22 minutes because she'd asked him to, and she felt something finish inside her that had been in process for a very long time. She was done being managed. The question was what she was going to do about it, and she had until morning to decide, and morning was coming. She didn't sleep. Not really. She lay in the guest room of Jae-min's estate, a room she'd seen once before, briefly, when he'd given her a tour months ago with the particular reserve of someone showing you something they weren't sure they wanted you to see, and she watched the ceiling and let her mind do what it needed to do, which was run the same sequence of facts in different orders, looking for the version where the math came out differently. It didn't. Her father had co-signed a loan. She had paid it back. But 18 months of repayment records didn't automatically erase whatever documentation Raymond Bennett had created on his end, and she didn't know what he'd created because she had never imagined she needed to know. You don't armor yourself against the people you believe are on your family as a weapon. It worked because you didn't see it as one until you were already bleeding. She got up at 5:15. The house was quiet in the particular way that large houses are quiet. Not empty, just contained. She found the kitchen by memory and stood at the counter and drank 2 glasses of water and looked out the window at the estate grounds in the early dark, the trees just beginning to separate from the sky. She had her laptop. One of Jae-min's men had retrieved it from the bakery the night before. She'd given him the key without quite processing that she was doing it, operating on a kind of automatic pragmatism that sometimes kicks in when the emotional machinery is temporarily overwhelmed. The laptop was on the kitchen counter now. Her loan documents were in a folder she hadn't opened in 8 months because she'd considered the matter closed. She opened it now. She went through every document, the original loan agreement, the co-signer addendum. 18 months of payment confirmations, each one time-stamped, each one showing Raymond Bennett's name on the original document and her name on the payment. She read the cosigner language 3 times. The cosigner addendum said what cosigner addendums say, that in the event of default, the cosigner assumed liability. It did not say investment, it did not say ownership, it did not confer equity, but it also didn't prevent Raymond Bennett from having a separate document, a private agreement, something she'd never signed, something created after the fact, that characterized his involvement differently. She couldn't know what he had until she saw it. By 6 a.m., she had organized everything into a single PDF and emailed it to an address Jae-min had given her the night before with the name Park Sung-ho. Send documents here. By 6:15, Jae-min appeared in the kitchen doorway. He was already dressed. Not the suit, a dark shirt, dark trousers, the slightly less formal version of his standard architecture. He looked at her at the counter with her laptop and the empty water glasses and said nothing for a moment. "You didn't sleep," he said. "I went through my loan documents." "And? The cosigner language doesn't support an ownership claim on its face," she said, "but I don't know what else he has." She closed the laptop. "I sent everything to your lawyer." He nodded. "Park will look at it this morning. We'll meet him at 9. She looked at him. "You already called him?" "Last night, after you went to bed. I told him to expect documents and to clear his morning." She didn't know what to do with that, with the experience of someone doing a thing before she asked. Not because they'd decided what she needed, but because they'd seen what the situation required and moved accordingly. She was so unaccustomed to it that it registered as slightly foreign, like hearing a familiar word in an unfamiliar accent. "Thank you," she said. He crossed to the other side of the counter and started a coffee maker that looked like it cost more than her first car. He did it with the comfort of someone who knew where everything was in his own kitchen, which was obvious but still somehow orienting to watch. Just a person, making coffee in the early morning. "How are you?" he asked. Not in the social way. "I keep thinking about my sister," she said. Not even angry. I've moved past the anger part for now. I just keep replaying the texts, the ones she sent while she knew, the ones that were so normal, asking about the flavor for the 3rd tier, asking if I could do lavender in the flowers, then changing her mind and saying no, keep the roses. She stopped. "She asked me to change the flowers," she said. 3 weeks before the wedding. I had to redo 14 of them. That was a 6-hour evening. She looked at the counter. "She asked me to redo them on a Tuesday." I know because I remember looking at my phone when her text came in, and I was already in the kitchen. It was 9:30 at night, and I said yes. I said yes and started taking the old ones apart. Jae-min set a cup of coffee in front of her. "She knew," Amara said. "That Tuesday. She knew." He sat across from her with his own cup, and she could feel him not saying the things that would be easy to say, the comforting things, the reductive things, the things that round off the sharp edges. He didn't say any of them. He just sat there with his coffee in the early morning and let her have the full weight of what she was carrying. "I think I'm done," she said. "With all of them. I think I'm completely done." She said it quietly, and it didn't feel like a dramatic declaration. It felt like a diagnosis. The quiet finality of a doctor saying, yes, that's what this is. Not because anything has changed in the last moment, but because you've finally allowed yourself to see what you've been looking at. "The bakery," she said. "If they actually try..." "Let's see what Park says first," Jae-min said. "Don't fight the thing until you know its shape." Park Sung-ho was 53, compact, with reading glasses he kept taking on and off, and a desk that looked like organized chaos, but from which he could retrieve any document in under 15 seconds. He had an office on the 28th floor of a building in downtown Houston that had a view of the city that should have been distracting, but wasn't, because Park had clearly long ago stopped seeing it. He had read her documents before they arrived. She could tell by the way he greeted them, not with the preliminary politeness of someone who needed to review, but with the focused directness of someone ready to report. "Sit down," he said. "Both of you." They sat. He put on his glasses, took them off, set them on the desk. "The cosigner addendum is standard," he said. "You're right that it doesn't confer ownership on its face. The language is liability-based, not equity-based. He assumed risk in the event of default. You didn't default. You paid 18 months of documented payments and the loan is retired." He tapped the folder in front of him. "Your records are clean." "But," Amara said, Park looked at her. The but is that I only have your sides of the documentation. If your father went to his own attorney and created a separate private agreement, something characterizing his cosign as an investment, and if that document exists and is signed, even by himself alone, it becomes a basis for a claim. Not a strong one, not automatically winning, but enough to force litigation. Litigation, she said. A lawsuit. He claims partial ownership, you dispute it, a court decides. He leaned back in his chair. It would be expensive and slow and damaging to the bakery's operations during the process, which is often the point. You don't have to win a lawsuit to cause damage. You just have to file one. Amara looked at her hands in her lap. Do you have any record, Park said, of conversations with your father about the nature of the cosign? Texts, emails, anything where he characterized it explicitly as a loan rather than an investment? She thought. When I approached him about it, it was in person, at his kitchen table. She stopped. I have the original ask in a text message. I asked him if he would co-sign a bank loan for me. The word loan is in the text. Park sat up. Do you have that text? It would be on my phone 3 years ago. Find it, he said. He wasn't unkind about it, just immediate. She went into her messages. 3 years back in a thread with her father was like excavating geology. Layers of logistics texts, appointment reminders, the occasional link he forwarded without comment. She scrolled. Her thumbs were not quite steady. She found it. Dad, I need to ask a favor. The bakery is struggling and I need a small business loan to cover the gap. The bank needs a co-signer. Would you be willing to co-sign a loan for me? I have a full repayment plan. It would be an 18-month loan at the bank's standard rate. I'm not asking for money, just your signature as co-signer. And his response 9 minutes later, I can do that. Just a loan co-sign, not any ownership or investment stuff. I'm retired and I don't need that complication. When do we go to the bank? She looked at the screen for 3 full seconds. Then she handed Park the phone. He read it. His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. A slight settling, the physical equivalent of there it is. This is significant, he said. He handed the phone back. His own words explicitly disclaiming ownership intent at the point of agreement, combined with your repayment records. He took his glasses off again and set them down carefully. If he files a claim, this is your first exhibit. It doesn't make a lawsuit disappear, but it makes it very difficult to sustain. Amara exhaled. Forward that message to me, Park said, and send me your full repayment records again, everything, sequential. He was already writing something. I'm going to prepare a cease and desist document. If your father makes any formal move toward a claim, we respond immediately, and we respond with this. He may not, Jae-min said. He'd been quiet through the whole meeting in the way he was quiet in rooms where someone else had the expertise, completely attentive, not decorative. His wife may have said it in anger without his knowledge. Either way, Park said, Amara has what she needs. He looked at her. I'd also recommend reaching out to your bank today. Not because there's an active threat, but because you want your relationship with them to be current and documented before any outside party attempts to contact them. I'll do it today, she said. Good. Park closed the folder. You built something worth protecting. The documentation exists to protect it. That's more than most people have. She took that in. The weight of it. Not relief exactly, but something closer to ground under her feet after a period of free fall. She thanked him. They stood. He shook her hand and then Jae-min's and saw them to the door with the efficiency of someone whose morning was already scheduled through to evening. In the elevator going down, she stood beside Jae-min and watched the floor numbers descend and felt the shape of the morning organizing itself into something she could act on. I need to go to the bakery, she said. Okay? And I need to call my parents. She felt her jaw tighten. Not to fight. I need to hear it from them directly. Whether my father actually intends to do anything or whether my mother said something in anger that she's going to walk back. She looked at the elevator doors. I need to know what I'm actually dealing with. Do you want to do that alone? She thought about it honestly, which was something she was trying to practice. No, she said, but I need to make the call alone. You can be there. She stopped. I've been handling my family in front of an audience my whole life. Every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every Sunday dinner where something went sideways and I managed it and smiled and folded it away. I need to not perform the call. She looked at him. Does that make sense? Yes, he said. No elaboration, just yes. I understand what you're saying. The elevator opened. They walked through the lobby of the building into the Houston morning, which was already hot. 8:45 and the sidewalk was radiating the night's stored warmth back into the air. And she took out her phone. She dialed her father's number. It rang 4 times. She was constructing what she'd say to voicemail when he picked up. Amara. His voice was careful. The voice he used when he knew something was coming and was deciding how to stand. Dad? She kept her own voice level. I need to ask you something directly, and I need a direct answer. A pause. All right. Did you or are you planning to file any kind of claim to ownership of Velvet Rose Patisserie based on the loan cosign from 3 years ago? Silence on the line. Not a long silence, but the specific silence of someone choosing their words with awareness that words were going to matter. Where's this coming from? He said. Mom said something last night, after I left the reception, about partial ownership, about your documentation. She was standing on the sidewalk in the Houston heat, and Jae-min was 3 feet away looking at the middle distance with his hands in his pockets. I need to know if that's real or if she was upset and said something she shouldn't have. Another silence. Your mother was upset, he said. She was saying things. Dad, yes or no? Do you have documentation that frames your cosign as an investment? The silence this time was 5 seconds long. I kept records, he said, the way I keep records of everything. What kind of records? I noted the amount, the date. I called it an investment in my personal ledger because that's how I think of supporting family. As an investment. His voice had shifted, slightly defensive now, the particular defensiveness of someone who has done a thing and constructed a justification for it that he believed until someone asked him to say it out loud. It's not legal. I'm not a lawyer. But you have a ledger that uses the word investment. Amara, you have it or you don't? I have a personal record. Yes. She pressed her free hand flat against her thigh. Her pulse was in her ears. I have a text message, she said, from 3 years ago where you explicitly said you were co-signing a loan and not taking any ownership or investment stake. I have 18 months of repayment records. The loan is retired. She stopped. Your personal ledger characterizing it differently doesn't change the legal reality. My lawyer has confirmed that. Silence. Your lawyer, he said. Yes. You went to a lawyer. Before 8 a.m. this morning, she said, because last night at my sister's wedding, my mother implied you might try to claim part of my bakery. So yes, I went to a lawyer. She could hear him breathing, heard him do the things she'd watched him do her whole life when confronted with the gap between what he'd done and how he'd framed it. A slight intake of breath, a recalibration. Nobody is trying to take your bakery, he said. I'm glad to hear that, she said. I'm going to need you to confirm that in writing. My lawyer will send something simple today. Amara said, it's not aggressive, Dad. It's documentation. You understand documentation. She kept her voice even. No heat in it, just the flat steadiness of someone who had cried everything available to cry the night before and was now operating on something cleaner. You've kept records your whole life. So have I. A long silence. Is this what we're doing? He said. Lawyers and documents? I don't know what you're doing, she said. I know what I'm doing. I'm protecting the thing I built. She stopped. The thing I built alone. Without help, without your investment, without anybody's capital except mine and the bank's, which I paid back. She heard him exhale. Heard something in it that might have been what remorse sounds like when it hasn't fully formed yet. Or maybe it was just the sound of a man who'd believed in a leverage point discovering it had been documented away. We'll sign the paper, he said finally. Thank you, she said. She ended the call. She stood on the Houston sidewalk for a moment with the phone at her side. The morning was full of city sounds, traffic, a delivery truck somewhere nearby, someone's phone playing music from a cracked window. Jae-min said nothing. He waited. He has a personal ledger with the word investment in it, she said. He said nobody's trying to take the bakery. He agreed to sign the document. Good. He said it like a man who'd had a plan and just found out the plan had a flaw. She looked at the street. I don't know if he actually intended to do anything. I don't know if my mother put the idea in his head years ago, or if he arrived there on his own, or if it was just a kind of ambient leverage he kept in his back pocket without ever really intending to use it. She stopped. I don't know which of those is worse. None of them are good, Jae-min said. No, she agreed. She put her phone in her bag. I need to go to the bakery, she said. I need to see it. Velvet Rose Patisserie was on a corner lot in Midtown, in a building that had been a dry cleaner and then a print shop, and then empty for 3 years before Amara had walked in and stood in the middle of the hollow space and thought yes. She had painted the walls herself, the particular shade of cream that she'd mixed from 3 different bases over 2 weekends until it was the color she saw in her head. The corner window she'd fought to keep looked out onto the intersection, and in the morning the light came through it at an angle that hit the glass display cases and made everything inside them look like it was lit from within. Jae-min waited outside, which she'd asked him to do without quite asking. She'd just said, I'll be 10 minutes in a tone that meant alone, and he'd understood. She unlocked the front door and went in. The commercial kitchen smell was there even on a Sunday. The residue of sugar and butter and the warm metal smell of the oven, and underneath it something that was just the building itself, the particular air of a space that had been inhabited by one person's work for long enough that the work had gotten into the walls. She stood in the middle of the front room and looked at it. 15 years. From a weekend market cart with a card table and a handwritten menu to this, the display cases, the marble counter, the back kitchen with its equipment she'd chosen and paid for over time, piece by piece, as she could afford it. The small chalkboard where Rosa wrote the daily specials in handwriting that had gotten progressively more artistic over the 3 years Rosa had worked there. The photograph on the wall near the register. Not her, not marketing, just a photograph of her grandmother's kitchen table in Birmingham, Alabama, the one she'd learned to bake on, because she'd wanted to remember where the beginning was. Her parents had never eaten here, not once in 15 years. They'd had opinions about it. Her mother had told her a bakery was unstable income. Her father had looked at the lease terms when she'd signed and said the cost per square foot seemed high. Her sisters had come in once, in the first year, and Serena had taken a photograph of a macaron for social media and left without buying anything. But in 15 years, neither of her parents had come and sat at one of these tables and ordered something and eaten it and said, "This is good. You did something here." She stood in the middle of her bakery and let herself feel that for a full minute without managing it. Then she walked to the back kitchen, washed her hands at the sink by pure muscle memory, and started making something. She didn't plan it. She just started, pulled the flour and the butter and the salt, went to the cold case for the cream cheese, found a bowl by feel. Her hands knew what they were doing before her head had decided. They always did in here. This was the one place where her body and her mind ran at the same speed and in the same direction. 20 minutes later, she had a small round of short crust pressed into a tart pan and a filling going on the stove, cream cheese and honey, and a small amount of lemon zest, the simplest thing she made, the one she'd learned from her grandmother at age 9, the one she still made when she needed to remember that she knew how to do this. She was standing at the stove watching the filling when the front bell rang. Her head came up. Through the pass-through window, she could see the front door. It was her mother. Amara Bennett was standing outside Velvet Rose Patisserie in the same pale gold dress from last night. She hadn't been home, Amara registered distantly, or hadn't changed, looking through the glass at the front door in a way that wasn't quite knocking, like she wasn't sure she had the right. Amara turned the stove to low. She walked to the front. She unlocked the door. They stood looking at each other through the threshold. "You talked to your father," Eleanor said. "Yes." "He called me." She paused. "He said you have a text." "I do." Eleanor looked at her. She looked tired in a way that was beyond last night, the specific exhaustion of someone who has not been sleeping well for longer than they've admitted. Her lipstick was mostly gone, and her hair was slightly less composed than she normally allowed in public, and she was standing outside her daughter's bakery on a Sunday morning with her hands folded in front of her, looking like something she couldn't quite name. "Can I come in?" she said. Amara stepped back from the door. Eleanor came in. She looked around the front room the way you look at a place you've never been, even though you've known it exists for 15 years, with the slightly displaced attention of someone recalibrating. "It's nice," she said. Amara said nothing. "I've never—" Eleanor stopped. "I know I've never come." "No," Amara agreed. Her mother moved to one of the small tables near the window. She sat down, and something in the sitting was different from Eleanor Bennett's usual way of occupying a chair. No performance of posture, no arrangement of herself for the room. She just sat, like someone whose management of appearances had temporarily exceeded their capacity. Amara sat across from her. "Last night," Eleanor said. "What I said. About the loan." "Yes. I was angry. Serena and I—" She stopped. "We argued after you left, and I said things I—" She stopped again. Her hands moved on the table, a small, restless gesture. Raymond was not going to do anything with that ledger. I want you to know that. He kept it the way he keeps everything. It wasn't— Mom. Amar's voice came out quiet. "The loan is not the thing I need to talk to you about." Eleanor looked at her. "The loan is documented and handled, and it's done," Amara said. "That's not why I'm sitting here." She felt the calm she'd arrived at in the small hours of this morning. Not peacefulness, not resignation, something more like the stillness that comes after you've made a decision you're not going to unmake. "I need to talk to you about Serena." Eleanor's expression shifted. Barely. But Amara had been reading her mother's face for 34 years. "She knew," Amara said, "about the house. Before she asked me to make the cake. She knew, and she didn't tell me. And I need to know if you knew she knew." The front window of velvet rose patisserie threw morning light across the table between them. Outside on the sidewalk, visible through the glass, Jae-min was standing with his back to the building, one of his men beside him, looking at the street. He wasn't looking in. He was just there. Eleanor looked at the table. The silence was different from last night's silences. Last night they'd all been performing, managing the guests, managing Amara, managing the version of themselves that existed in public. This silence had no audience. It was just two people at a table with 34 years between them and the morning coming through the window. "She called me," Eleanor said, "when we made the decision to sell. I told her before I told you." She looked up. "I told her first because I thought she'd know how to help me, how to talk to you, how to make it easier." Amara heard that land. "You told her," she said, "and you asked her to help make it easier, and she asked you to wait until after the wedding. She said you'd be focused on the cake and it wasn't a good time. She said I'd be useful until after the wedding," Amara said. "Mom," she said, "keep her busy with the cake so she won't make problems before the ceremony. That's what she said." "That's not—" Eleanor started. "Maya told me," Amara said. "Denise heard it. Serena said those words." Eleanor's hands on the table were very still, and Amara looked at her mother, at this woman who had raised her and loved her in whatever fractured way she knew how, and had also, with perfect consistency, chosen the path of least resistance every time that path ran through Amara, and she felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Not rage, not even grief exactly, something sadder than grief. She felt sorry for her mother, because Eleanor Bennett was sitting in a bakery she'd never once visited, in a gold dress from the night before, looking like a woman who had spent 40 years making choices that all seemed reasonable at the time, and had woken up this morning in a place she didn't entirely recognize. "I need you to hear something," Amara said, "and I need you to actually hear it, not manage it, not think about how to respond. Just hear it." Eleanor looked at her. "I am done," Amara said, "performing for this family. I am done making things and giving things and absorbing things and coming back for more because that's what you do for family." She stopped. "I love you. I genuinely love you, and I am done." Her voice was steady, completely steady. "I'm going to find somewhere to live that is not your house. I'm going to take care of my bakery, and I'm going to stop waiting for you or Dad or Serena to become the people I spent 30 years hoping you would be." Eleanor's eyes were bright, something working at the corners. "Amara?" "I'm not angry," Amara said. "I need you to understand that. I'm not doing this in anger. I'm doing this because I finally understand that nothing is going to change if I keep going back for it." She folded her hands on the table. "I don't want an apology. I don't want explanations. I just wanted to say it to your face, and now I have." Outside, a car went past. The morning sounds of the city, indifferent and continuous. Eleanor Bennett pressed her lips together, reached up and touched the corner of one eye with one finger, precise, controlled. Not crying, just managing the possibility of it. Then she stood up. She picked up her purse. She looked at her daughter, sitting at the table in the morning light of a bakery she'd never been to, in the same emerald dress from last night, hair slightly unraveled, with the absolute stillness of someone who has set something down and is not picking it up again. "You sound like your grandmother," Eleanor said. Her voice was unsteady in a way Amara had never heard from her. When she was about 40, she had a conversation with her own mother. She came home from it different. "I never knew what was said." She paused. "I asked her once. She said she finally told the truth, and it cost her something, and she'd paid it gladly." She walked to the door, put her hand on the handle, turned back once. "The cake was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen," she said. "At the wedding. I should have told you that this morning when you brought it." Her hand tightened on the handle. "I should have told you that." She pushed through the door. The bell above it rang once, high and small. Amara sat at the table in the morning light and listened to her mother's heels on the sidewalk receding, and then the sound of a car door, and then nothing. She sat there for a long time. Then she went back to the kitchen and took the filling off the stove before it went too far, and finished the tart, and when it came out of the oven, she cut 2 slices, imprecise, the way you do when you're not making something for sale, and she carried them to the front and sat back at the table and waited. 3 minutes later, the front bell rang again, and Jae-min came in, and she pushed the second plate across the table to him without explanation, and he sat down, and they ate in the morning quiet of Velvet Rose Patisserie while the Houston Sunday organized itself outside the corner window. "My mother came," she said. "I know. I saw her." She confirmed everything. He nodded once. "She said the cake was beautiful," Amara said, on the way out. He looked at the small shift in her face when she said it. Not warmth exactly, but something adjacent. "It was," he said. "I've seen your work for 7 months. That cake—" He stopped, reconsidered. "You know what it was?" "Yeah," she said. "I do." She ate the last bite of her tart, set the fork down. Outside, through the corner window, she could see the Sunday morning street. A woman walking a dog. A man on a bicycle. 2 kids on the opposite corner who'd stopped to look at something on the sidewalk, heads together. The total absorption of children discovering something they hadn't seen before. The bakery was hers. The documentation was clear. Her mother had been here for the first time and had said the thing Amara had spent 15 years not being told. And there was still something unfinished. She could feel it like a note held too long, a structural tension in the story of the last 24 hours that hadn't resolved yet. Serena. Not the house. Not the loan. Serena, who had asked her to redo 14 flowers on a Tuesday night in April while knowing what was coming, who had texted Gorgeous and make sure it arrives on time, and had stood at the wedding venue terrace last night and said, "You always find a way to make everything about you." Serena, who had called her in the morning, twice. She'd seen the missed calls and declined to process them yet, setting them aside the way you set aside something that needs your full capacity and you don't have it yet. She had it now. She looked at her phone on the table. Jae-min looked at her, looking at the phone. "My sister called this morning," she said. "I know," he said. He pushed his empty plate aside. "What do you want to do?" She picked up the phone. She looked at Serena's name in the call log for a long moment. The 2 missed calls from 8:15 and 8:40, sitting there with the patient insistence of things that have to be dealt with eventually. She pressed call. It rang once. "Amara." Serena's voice was not what she expected. It was flat. Stripped of the wedding day performance, stripped of the managed tone she'd used on the terrace last night. Just her sister's voice, unprocessed. "I need to see you." "I'm at the bakery," Amara said. A pause. "I know. Mom texted me." Another pause. "Can I come?" Amara looked at Jae-min across the table. He was looking at the corner window, giving her the privacy of not watching her face. She thought about her sister. About 29 years of knowing someone's face. About the Tuesday night in April, and the text that said Gorgeous, and the careful management of a timeline designed to keep Amara cooperative and useful until she was no longer needed. She thought about what she needed from this conversation, and what she was willing to give, and where the line was between the two. "Come," she said, and waited for the door to open, and for whatever came through it with her sister's face to be the last thing she had to face before she could finally start deciding what came next. Serena arrived 18 minutes after the call. Amara heard the car before she saw it. A door closing on the street outside, then heels on the sidewalk, the particular rhythm of her sister's walk that she'd known since they were teenagers sharing a hallway. Quick and purposeful, the walk of someone who'd decided something on the way over and was committed to it until the moment the door opened and reality renegotiated the terms. The bell rang. Serena came in still wearing the dress from last night, ivory, silk, the wedding dress replaced at some point with the rehearsal dinner dress she must have had packed in the bridal suite, which meant she hadn't been home either. Her hair was down now, the elaborate updo from the ceremony pulled apart, and she looked younger for it, less composed, more like the Serena that existed before the performance of Serena had become the primary occupation. She saw Jae-min first. A slight hesitation in her forward motion, the recalibration of someone who'd expected to walk into a different scene. Then she looked at Amara. "Thank you for letting me come," she said. "Sit down," Amara said. Serena sat. She set her purse on the table and looked at it for a moment and then looked up. Jae-min was still at the table, which Serena registered without comment, which told Amara something, that whatever Serena had come to say, she'd decided it was worth saying in front of him. "I don't know where to start," Serena said. "Try the beginning," Amara said. "When Mom told you about the house." Serena's jaw moved once. "March," she said. "Mom called me in March. She said they'd been talking about selling for a while, that the house was too big, that they wanted to be in something smaller before Dad's health became more complicated." She stopped. "She asked me how to tell you." "And you told her to wait until after the wedding." "I told her the timing was bad," Serena said. "You were already working on the cake. You were already—" She stopped. Started again. "I told her you were in the middle of something big, and it wasn't a good time to add stress." "That's one way to say it," Amara said. Serena looked at her. The careful composure she'd arrived with was already showing its seams. "I know how it sounds." "I don't think you do," Amara said, "or you would have said something different just now. You said you didn't want to add stress. What you did was make sure I kept working on a project for your wedding while withholding information that directly affected my life." She kept her voice even, not cold, even. "Those two things are different. I know." "Serena, you knew for 4 months. I know." Her sister's voice had dropped to something less managed, something that sounded like the word it actually was. "I know. I've been awake all night knowing." "I redid 14 flowers," Amara said, "in April, on a Tuesday. You texted me at 9:30 at night while I was already in the kitchen and asked me to change them. I spent 6 hours on it." She paused. "You knew that night." Something moved through Serena's face that wasn't performance. A contracting, a wincing at the specificity of it, the way you wince when someone names the exact thing you've been trying to not name directly. "Yes," she said. "You texted me gorgeous," Amara said. The word sat between them in the morning light. Just that word, stripped of context, which was somehow worse than any accusation. Serena pressed her lips together. Her eyes were filling, but she was fighting it, the same way they'd both been trained to fight it. The family that didn't cry in front of each other because tears were dramatic, and dramatic was the thing you were not allowed to be. "I don't have a defense," she said. "I've been sitting in the car trying to construct one, and I can't." She looked at her purse. "I told myself I was protecting you from the stress. I told myself you'd be fine, that a month's warning was enough time, that you were strong and you'd handle it the way you handle everything." She stopped. "But that wasn't it. The real thing was—" She stopped again, looked at the table. "The real thing was that I needed you to finish the cake, and I was afraid that if you knew, you wouldn't." The honesty of it was so unexpected that Amara didn't immediately respond. She sat with it for a moment, the shape of it, her sister, arriving at the truth. Not because it was comfortable, but because something in the night had stripped the alternatives away. "Would you have?" Serena asked. "If you'd known in March, would you have still done it?" Amara considered that, really considered it, without the heat of last night or the exhaustion of this morning coloring the calculation. "I don't know," she said. "Maybe. I probably would have said something. I would have been angry. I might have—" She stopped. "I might have set conditions. Said I'd do the cake if we talked about the house first. Something. She looked at her sister. You didn't give me the chance to decide. You decided for me. Yes, Serena said. That's the thing, Serena. It's not even the cake. It's the deciding. Mom decided who was in the photographs. Dad decided when to evict me. You decided what I could handle knowing. She turned the empty plate on the table slightly, a small motion. I have been the family member that everyone decides things for. And I have been going along with it for 34 years because somewhere in me I believed that the deciding was proof of caring, that being managed meant being needed. She stopped. Last night I figured out that's not true. Serena was crying now. Not dramatically, quietly, the way people cry when they're ashamed rather than sad. Tears that come without performance because they're not for anyone else. She didn't reach for her purse, didn't look for a tissue. She just let them come. I've been jealous of you, she said, my whole life. I know that's... She laughed, short and wet. I know how that sounds. You were the one everyone... She stopped. You were the one Mom used as the example of what not to be. You were the one Dad was disappointed in. And I was the successful one, the one who married well, the one who... She wiped her eye with the back of her hand. But you have something I've never had. Amara waited. You build things, Serena said. She looked around the bakery with reddened eyes. You built this. You built it from nothing, by yourself, and it's real, and it's yours. And when you walk in here, everything in this room is because you decided it should be here. Her voice had roughed around the edges. I have never built anything. I have acquired things. I have married into things. I have arranged things. She looked at her sister. But I've never made anything the way you make things. The morning light moved slightly as a cloud passed over outside. The front room of velvet rose shifted into a softer version of itself for a moment. Amara looked at her sister. 30 years of a face she knew better than most things in the world. The architecture of it, under stress, under happiness, under the years of being the one the family pointed to as evidence that they were doing something right. You could have told me you felt that way, Amara said. Any time in 30 years. I know. Instead of the dress, Serena flinched. The dress was deliberate, Amara said, not a question. A long silence. Yes, Serena said, so quietly it was almost nothing. Amara had known. She'd known the moment she'd put it on. But there is a difference between knowing something and having the person responsible say the word yes in a voice stripped of everything except the admission. She breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The kitchen smell of the bakery around her, constant and grounding. Why? She said. Serena looked at the table. Because I wanted you to feel. I wanted you to be uncomfortable. I wanted you to stand next to me in my wedding photographs and feel... She stopped. I wanted one day where I wasn't measuring myself against you in my own head, where you were the one who didn't quite fit. She looked up. I know what that is. I know exactly what that is. Mean, Amara said simply. Yes. They sat with that. Jae-min had gone entirely still across the table. He was looking at the corner window. His breathing was slow and controlled, the bearing of someone who has trained themselves to take up exactly the space they choose to take up, and no more. I don't know how to fix it, Serena said. Any of it. I don't know if fix is even... She stopped. I don't know if you want to fix it. I don't know either, Amara said. That's the honest answer. I don't know. Serena looked at her. I'm not going to tell you it's fine, Amara said. It's not fine. It's going to take me a long time to sort out what I feel about all of it. And I'm not going to compress that into a moment in my bakery because it would be comfortable for both of us to go home resolved. She paused. But I hear you. What you said about being jealous, about building things. She looked at her sister. I hear it. Serena nodded once. Small. I need you to do something, Amara said. Anything. Don't say anything. Just whatever I ask, consider it before you say yes or no. Don't say anything reflexively. Serena nodded again. I need you to tell Mom and Dad, Amara said, that the cake cost $4,000. Not that I want payment. I don't. But I need them to know the number. I need that number said out loud in front of all of you so nobody can pretend that what I gave was a casual thing, a small thing. She looked at her sister. Can you do that? Serena was quiet for a moment. considering, as Amara had asked. Yes, she said. I can do that. And I need some time, Amara said. I need you to not call me or text me or come to the bakery for a while. Not because I'm done with you, because I need to be somewhere without managing our relationship for a bit. She met her sister's eyes. I need to breathe. How long? I don't know. Oh, I'll tell you when I know. Serena pressed her lips together, nodded. She picked up her purse. She stood. She stood at the table for a moment looking at Amara with the particular expression of someone at the end of something, at a place where the road they've been traveling ends, and there is no clear indication of what comes next. The sugar flowers, she said, on the cake. They were the most beautiful thing I've ever seen at a wedding. Her voice was slightly unsteady. The ones you redid. On that Tuesday. She stopped. I'm sorry about the Tuesday. She walked to the door, pushed it open. The bell rang high and brief. She was gone. Amara sat at the table and looked at the door for a moment after the sound had faded. Then she put both hands flat on the table and pushed herself up to standing, and she went back to the kitchen, and she washed the bowl and the tart pan from the morning's baking, and stacked them in the drying rack and turned off the kitchen light, and came back to the front room. Jae-min was standing now, at the corner window, looking out at the Sunday street. She stood beside him. She told the truth eventually, he said. Not a defense of Serena, just an observation. Some people need the night to strip everything else away, Amara said, before they can get to the real thing. Do you believe her? She considered it. I believe she meant it this morning. I don't know what she'll do with it. She looked at the intersection outside. A family walked past. Two parents, a small child on a bicycle with training wheels, the child wobbling gamely. I've forgiven people before and had to do it again later for the same thing. I don't know if I'm doing that here or if this is actually something different. I won't know for a while. He nodded. She looked at the corner of her bakery. At the counter, the display cases, the chalkboard where Rosa's handwriting waited for tomorrow's specials. At her grandmother's kitchen table photograph on the wall. I need to find an apartment, she said, but 30 days. Yes. I've been looking at the same neighborhood as the bakery for 2 years, but the prices... She stopped. I don't want to think about it today. I want to think about it tomorrow, practically, with a clear head and a list. You can stay at the estate, he said, as long as you need. She looked at him. Jae-min. The guest room, he said. Not a complication, just a room, while you look. She studied his face, the evenness of it, the lack of pressure in the offer. The way he said it the same way he said most things. Without visible investment in the answer, which she'd learned over 7 months was not absence of caring, but the specific courtesy of someone who'd been around enough pressure to know what it felt like, and didn't want to be the source of it. That's a significant offer, she said. It's a room, he said. With a kitchen you're welcome to use at 5 in the morning, which I've now seen you do. She almost smiled. Thank you, she said. He looked back out the window. She looked at the street with him. Tell me something, she said. About you. Something I don't know. He was quiet for a moment, thinking or deciding. With him the two were hard to distinguish. When I was 17, he said, I wanted to be an architect. She looked at him. I was good at math. I liked structure, the way things are held up by what you can't see. He said it the way people say things they haven't said in a long time, slightly careful with the shape of the words. My father said it was impractical. He said the family business needed someone who understood other kinds of structure. He paused. I understood that kind of structure too, quickly. Better than the architecture in some ways. He glanced at her. But I still notice buildings. The ones that were designed by someone who understood load-bearing. The ones that looked like the person building them thought about what they couldn't see. She thought about that. About the bakery she was standing in, which she'd designed around the corner window because the light came through at the right angle in the morning, because she'd understood intuitively that some things hold a space up that you can't point to directly. Your building, she said. The restaurant last night, the one without a sign. I had some input, he said. On the back room. The window, she said. One window. Positioned exactly right. He looked at her. I noticed, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Then something moved in his face that she'd seen before but only rarely. Not a smile exactly, the thing before a smile, when the decision to allow it is still being made. You noticed, he said. I notice things, she said. It's not a skill I turned off when I walked into your restaurant sad and hungry. He did smile then, small and real and not managed. She filed it away in the category of things she was keeping. She spent 3 hours in the bakery that afternoon, not working, or not working in the productive sense. She cleaned things that didn't need cleaning, checked inventory out of habit, sat in the kitchen for 40 minutes, doing nothing in particular, allowing the space to do the thing it always did, which was to make her feel like herself in the most functional version of that phrase. Danny called at noon. Her employee had heard something from a friend who'd been at the wedding. Houston was that kind of city, certain circles small enough that information traveled in hours. And Danny was checking in with the particular combination of concern and discretion that made her irreplaceable. I'm fine, Amara told her. The bakery is fine. Everything's handled. You don't need to worry. I'm not worried, Danny said. I'm being nosy. Then yes, my sister's wedding was eventful. Yes, a Korean man in a very good suit arrived with multiple vehicles. Yes, some family things were said. I'll tell you the full story on Tuesday when we're back in, and you can judge everybody appropriately. I love Tuesdays, Danny said, and hung up. Amara set the phone down and felt the specific warmth of Danny, of Rosa, of Terrence, who was 19, and learning. The people who came to work in the thing she'd built, who arrived every morning and made it real in a way that didn't require her family's acknowledgement or her parents' understanding of what a cost per square foot meant. She had built something worth showing up for. That was not a small thing. Park Sung-ho called at 2 in the afternoon. I've drafted the document, he said. Simple, clear, 1 page. Your father disclaims any ownership interest in Velvet Rose Patisserie, past or present, in exchange for which you make no claim arising from the loan's implicit terms. Everyone walks away clean. You think he'll sign it? You said he agreed on the phone, and his text message gives him no credible position to fight from. A pause. I've seen people fight anyway, out of pride. But I'll say this. He's a man who spent his life being careful with documentation. He knows what a paper trail looks like. He knows he said what he said in that text 3 years ago. Park paused. I think he'll sign. He did. The document was sent at 4 in the afternoon, signed and returned by 5:42. Raymond Bennett, retired principal, with his clean, precise signature, the same signature she'd watched him put on 30 years of school forms and insurance papers and the birthday cards he gave every year in the same pale blue envelopes. She looked at the scanned signature on her laptop screen for a moment. She thought about the man who had co-signed her loan and then noted it in his personal ledger as an investment, who had stood at a wedding venue terrace and told her the photographs would look better without her in them, who had driven her to cardiology appointments every other Thursday for 8 months, and sometimes, on the drive home, had turned on the old jazz station that they both liked and neither of them had had to say anything. People were not simple, not even the ones who hurt you. That was the thing that made it so difficult. The inability to land on one clean version, to file someone into a category that settled the question. Her father was the man who signed the loan for her, and he was the man who quietly categorized the act in a way that left him leverage. Both of those were him. She'd been trying her whole life to resolve the contradiction into one face, and this was the week she understood it didn't resolve. You just learned to carry the complexity without being crushed by it. She closed the laptop. She sat in the quiet of the bakery in the late afternoon light. Then she called her bank, spoke to a manager she'd worked with for 4 years, explained that she was proactively documenting the retirement of a historical co-signed loan and would be sending confirmation records. The manager said that was perfectly straightforward and she should email them over at her convenience. She emailed them over immediately. The manager sent a confirmation within 20 minutes. It was done. All of it was done. She sat in the kitchen in the near dark of the late afternoon and felt the peculiar weight that descends after something is over. Not lightness, which is what people say, but a kind of heaviness that is different from the previous heaviness because it has no urgency in it, no more preparing, no more bracing. Just what's left after the storm passes, and you look at what's still standing. She was still standing. The bakery was still standing. She had 30 days to find an apartment. She had 3 employees who showed up on Tuesday. She had a lawyer she trusted and a bank manager who picked up the phone and a cousin in Atlanta who had told her to call tomorrow. She had called Jae-min in the worst moment of the previous night, and he had said, I'm coming, and he had come. She thought about that for a while, in the near-dark kitchen that smelled like sugar and butter and her grandmother's house in Birmingham. I was waiting outside when she locked up. Not the way security waits, positioned, alert, scanning. Just standing near the building with his jacket over one arm, looking at the intersection, present in the unhurried way he always was. One of his men was nearby, but not adjacent. The whole arrangement had a looseness to it that was different from the tightness of the wedding estate, from the 3 black vehicles arriving with unified purpose. She locked the door and stood on the sidewalk, and the evening was coming in now, the heat just beginning to concede at the edges, the sky above Houston going from its bright daytime white towards something with more color in it. "My father signed the document," she said. "I know. Park texted me." He looked at her. "How are you?" "I'm—" She stopped, assessed honestly. "I'm tired. But the kind of tired that's okay. The kind where the tired makes sense, where you know what caused it." She looked at the bakery door, the closed sign she'd flipped an hour ago. 3 months ago, if someone had told me this week would happen, "Don't do that," he said. Not harshly. 3 months ago is where it was 3 months ago. This is where you are now. She looked at him. "You know," she said, "for someone who professionally operates in futures and contingencies and the management of outcomes, I know the difference between managing outcomes and managing moments," he said. "Moments you just have to be in." She stood beside him on the sidewalk in the evening and let that land. "My sister said she was jealous of me," she said. "My whole life." "I believe it." I was surprised. "I know," he said. "That's part of what they did. They made you believe you were the deficient one. If you'd believed you had something worth envying, you might have protected it sooner." She thought about that. About the emerald dress, deliberately wrong. About the service entrance. About the photographs. About 4 months of managing her with a cake. "You'd think being told you're lacking your whole life would make you stop believing you had anything worth taking," she said. "But they kept taking anyway." She turned it over. "They must have known, on some level, what was there." "Of course they did," he said. "You can't exploit nothing." She exhaled. "That's a cold way to put it," she said. "Yes," he agreed, "but accurate." She looked at the evening street. A restaurant on the opposite corner was just beginning its dinner service, the door propped open, the sound of kitchen sounds drifting out in the warm air. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "Why did you keep coming to the bakery? In the beginning, that first month, you came 4 times in 3 weeks. I thought you needed a pastry chef for something and kept changing your mind about the event." He was quiet for a moment. "I didn't need a pastry chef," he said. "I know that now. I came the first time because someone told me about a pastry chef on the Midtown corner who'd built her entire shop around a window for the morning light." He paused. "I wanted to see what a person who made decisions like that was like." She looked at him. "And the second time," she said, "you argued with me about meringue. And the third?" "I wanted to know what you'd argue about next." She was quiet for a moment. The evening moved around them, the city doing its early evening things, indifferent and continuous and not requiring anything from either of them. "You are," she said slowly, "a genuinely strange man." "I know," he said. "I mean that specifically. You are strange in the specific way of someone who decided what they wanted, which was to be around someone who wasn't going to manage what they said around you, and then simply did that. Came back until you had it." She tilted her head. "Most people make it much more complicated. Most people are afraid of what they want," he said. "I have enough things to be afraid of. I don't add to the list unnecessarily." She thought about what that kind of life required. The precision of having decided that fear was a resource to be allocated carefully, not a general atmospheric condition. The loneliness of operating that way. The efficiency of it. The way it had produced a man who drove 22 minutes when a woman called him at a wedding and said, "Can you come get me?" without explaining why, without making the value calculation visible. "I don't know what we are," she said. "You and me. I've been careful not to think about it too directly, because thinking about it directly was going to complicate something, and I had enough complicated." "I know," he said. "But I want to think about it now," she said. "Directly." He turned to look at her. The evening light hit his face at an angle that made him look older and younger simultaneously, which was a strange thing light could do to certain faces. "I'm not easy to know," she said. I'm not saying that as some kind of warning. I'm saying it as information. I've spent 34 years learning how to be invisible to people who should have been able to see me clearly, and I don't know how much of that is going to take time to undo. I might be defensive about things that don't require defense. I will probably argue about pastry-related topics with unwarranted frequency. She held his gaze. I'm also the person who builds windows because of what light does at certain angles. I remember what people say when they don't think anyone is paying attention. I make things that last. I'm told I'm loyal to a fault, though I'm currently reevaluating what to a fault means when you've been loyal to people who didn't deserve it. He listened. No interruption, no managing of the direction. I'm trying, she said, for the first time in my life, to say what I want instead of managing what I say based on what I think I'm allowed to want. She paused. So, what I want is to know you, the way you know a person, slowly, imperfectly, with arguments about things that don't matter and conversations about things that do. I want to see the buildings you notice. I want to know why you actually went into architecture before your father redirected you and whether you've ever gone back to it even privately. She stopped. I want to know if you eat breakfast or just coffee, because in 7 months I've never once seen you eat in the morning. Something was happening to his expression. Slow, like a structure shifting. Not the almost smile from earlier, but something with more weight to it. Something that looked like a man being seen clearly and allowing it. Just coffee, he said. In the morning. That's a problem, she said, nutritionally. I'm aware. I'll be staying in your guest room. Yes. I'll be in your kitchen at 5 in the morning. I've established that. I'm going to make you eat breakfast, she said. That's not negotiable. He looked at her for a moment. All right, he said. She held out her hand. Not for a handshake, something else. Something that didn't have an established name because it wasn't a category she'd operated in before. Just her hand open between them, asking for the same thing back. He looked at it for a moment. Then he put his hand in hers. His hand was larger than she'd registered in the abstract. Warm. The grip was calibrated, firm enough to mean something, careful enough to be a question rather than an answer. They stood like that on the Houston sidewalk in the evening, outside the bakery she'd built around a window, and the city moved around them in its unhurried evening way, and neither of them said anything for a while because there wasn't anything that needed saying. She called Maya that night. She'd promised tomorrow, but she called that night because Maya had been there at the wedding in the 3rd row with her, and had texted in the right sequence of urgency and precision, and had hugged her for 3 seconds longer than a social hug. And some people you don't make wait when you said tomorrow and you mean it. She told Maya almost everything, not all of it. Some of it was still too new to be spoken, still in the process of calcifying into something she could hand to another person without it crumbling. But she told her about the call with her father, the document, the conversation with Serena in the bakery, her mother, and what she'd said about the grandmother. Maya listened without interruption, which was its own skill, one Amara had never adequately thanked her for. Your grandmother's conversation, Maya said when she'd finished. The one your mom mentioned. I know that story. I heard it from my mom years ago. Your grandmother went to see her mother when she was 38, and she was in there for 2 hours, and she came out and her mother was different with her after that. My mom said she never knew what your grandmother said in there. A pause. I think you just found out. Amara sat with that. She told the truth, Amara said. Whatever it was. She told the truth, and it cost her something, and she paid it gladly. And your mom told you that story, Maya said. This morning, at your bakery. She did. Amara. Maya's voice was careful. I think your mom knows. I think she knows what she's been doing, and she's been doing it anyway. And this morning she walked into your bakery for the first time and gave you the one thing she had that she thought might, I don't know, count for something. She paused. I'm not defending her. I'm just saying that's a woman who knows, at some level, what she's given and what she hasn't. Amara thought about her mother in the pale gold dress, the lipstick mostly gone, standing at the bakery counter looking around with the eyes of someone arriving somewhere they should have been a long time ago. The cake was the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I should have told you that this morning when you brought it. I know, Amara said. What are you going to do with that? Maya said. Nothing yet, she said. Let it be what it is for a while. Not everything has to become a decision immediately. That's new, Maya said, not critically, noting. I'm trying things, Amara said. 3 weeks later, she signed a lease on an apartment 4 blocks from the bakery. Second floor, corner unit, with a window in the kitchen that faced east. She hadn't planned the east-facing window. She'd found the apartment through an ordinary listing and gone to look at it on a Tuesday afternoon and stood in the empty kitchen and watched the way the light came through and said yes before she'd checked the square footage. She moved in with what she had, which was less than she'd expected. She'd overestimated how much of her life in her parents' house was her things, and underestimated how much was simply the accumulated furniture of a place she'd been borrowing. Her things fit in the new apartment without crowding it. There was space. She hadn't had personal space in 3 years. She stood in the middle of the kitchen that first evening after everything was unboxed and looked at the space and felt it. Jae-min had offered to send people to help her move. She'd said no to the people and yes to the van, which had arrived Saturday morning driven by a quiet man named Daniel, who'd loaded boxes without being asked to and accepted one of the small lemon tarts she'd brought as payment, with the solemnity of someone who understood they were receiving something real. She'd put her grandmother's photograph on the kitchen wall. The Birmingham table, the quality of light that existed in that kitchen, and in this one, the through line of it. She'd put nothing else on the walls yet. She was in no hurry. She saw Jae-min on Thursday nights. Not always. Not as a rule. Thursdays had emerged from the logistics of both their lives. His schedule was what it was, a structure she was learning to map around without fully knowing its territory, and she was fine with that because her schedule was also a structure and she hadn't invited him fully into it yet either. They were learning the topography of each other slowly, the way you learn a city you've moved to. Main roads first, then the shortcuts, then the streets that aren't on any map, but that you find because you're paying attention. He ate breakfast now. She left something in the kitchen when she stayed and he ate it and didn't make it a discussion. She took that as a promising sign about his general adaptability to being cared for in small, practical ways. She'd seen his architectural notebooks once, not by searching for them. She'd been looking for a pen in his study and found them in an open drawer, 4 notebooks going back years, filled with the precise line work of someone who'd never entirely let the original interest go. Elevations, structural calculations, the notations of a man who still thought in those terms when he was thinking about something he didn't need to manage. She'd taken a pen and left the notebooks where she'd found them, and hadn't said anything about it. He'd know she'd seen them. He had that quality. If he wanted to talk about them, he would. 6 weeks after the wedding, her father came to the bakery. She was alone in the front room, doing the weekly inventory she preferred to do herself, when she heard the bell. She looked up, and there he was in the doorway. Navy suit, not the good one, the one he wore for ordinary occasions. Holding his hat in both hands in front of him, the way men of his generation held things when they didn't know what else to do with their hands. He looked around the front room. He looked at the display cases, at the counter, at the chalkboard with Rosa's handwriting. He looked at the window at the corner and at the quality of light that came through it and landed on the marble in a way that made even an empty counter look considered. He looked at the photograph of the kitchen table from Birmingham. He stood looking at it for long enough that it wasn't incidental. "That's your grandmother's kitchen," he said. "Yes," Amara said. He looked at it a moment longer. Then he looked at her. "I didn't come to—" He stopped. Tried again. "I'm not going to say anything about the document or the phone call. Any of that." He straightened slightly. "I came because I haven't been here. In 15 years, I've never come here." He looked around the room again with the eyes of a man making an inventory of a different kind. "Your mother told me what she said. When she came." Amara waited. "I've been sitting with some things," he said, "for the last few weeks. Some decisions I made. The way they look from where I'm standing now versus how they looked when I made them." He stopped. "I'm not going to perform a big speech about it. I'm not built for that, and you'd see through it anyway. You always could see through things." He said the last sentence with something in it she hadn't heard from him before. Not pride exactly, but something adjacent. Recognition. The particular note of a man acknowledging a quality he'd spent years finding inconvenient. "Would you like to sit down?" she said. He looked at the small table by the window. The same table where Serena had sat 3 weeks ago, with her wedding dress replaced and her eyes reddened. The same table where Eleanor had sat in the pale gold dress. "I'll stand," he said. "I won't keep you long." He turned his hat slightly in his hands. "I want to know what you sell here. What to order. She looked at him for a moment. Sit down, Dad, she said. He sat. He set the hat on the table beside him. She went behind the counter. She brought him a slice of the honey and cream cheese tart she'd made on Thursday. The one from her grandmother's recipe. The simplest thing she made. The first thing she'd ever learned to bake. She put it in front of him with a fork and a small napkin and a glass of water. He looked at it. He picked up the fork. He took a bite. She watched his face. She'd watched people eat her food for 15 years, had developed the particular literacy of reading the moment of recognition when something hit correctly. She watched it happen in her father's face, the small adjustment, the way his jaw moved slightly as he tasted it. That's, he said. He stopped. Your grandmother made something like this. Her recipe, Amara said. I've had it since I was 14. I asked her to write it down for me when she still could. She wrote it on a paper towel. She paused. I still have the paper towel. He looked at the photograph on the wall, then at the tart, then at her. He ate the whole slice without speaking. She didn't fill the silence. She'd been filling silences for 34 years, and she'd decided to try leaving them alone and see what they did without her managing them. What this one did was settle, become something that didn't need to be filled. When he was done, he set the fork down carefully, parallel to the plate the way he'd been taught and the way he'd taught her. How much? He said. For the tart? For the cake, he said. For Serena's cake. I want to know the number. She looked at him. Serena had said she'd tell them, but he was asking her directly, which was something else. $4,000, she said. He absorbed that with the stillness of someone who'd known a number was coming and had tried to prepare for it and found he wasn't quite prepared. I'll write you a check, he said. You don't have to… Amara. His voice was quiet and for once not managing her with it. Let me write you the check. She was quiet for a moment. Okay, she said. He reached into his jacket pocket and produced a checkbook that he'd clearly brought with him, which meant he'd decided to do this before he came in, which meant the coming in was itself a kind of decision he'd carried here from wherever he'd been sitting with it. He wrote the check with his precise hand. He tore it out along the perforation and set it on the table. $4,000. Payable to Velvet Rose Patisserie. He picked up his hat. I'd like to come back sometime, he said. Not to discuss anything, just to… He looked around the room. Just to sit here. She looked at her father, at the face she'd been reading for 34 years, the one that had never quite resolved into something simple enough to fully trust or fully release. You can come on Saturday mornings, she said. We're quieter on Saturdays before 10. He nodded, once. The same nod she'd watched him give to students and colleagues her whole childhood. The nod that meant understood, I'll do that. We're agreed. He left. The bell above the door rang high and small. She picked up the check. She looked at it for a moment. The precise signature, the number written in the particular way her father had always written numbers. The 4 with the open top that she'd copied without knowing when she was 7 and still wrote the same way. She put it in the register. She went back to her inventory. The first Saturday he came back, he sat at the corner table with a coffee and a slice of something she'd made that morning. A simple apple cake with cardamom, a new thing she was testing. And he read the newspaper he'd brought with him, the print edition that he'd subscribed to for 40 years. He didn't talk much. She didn't make him. He stayed for 45 minutes. He paid, exact change, and said he'd enjoyed it and he'd see her next week. He came the next week. And the week after that. She didn't tell anyone this was happening. She didn't know yet what it was, whether it was repair or just the end of open hostility or something in between that didn't have a name yet. She let it be undecided. She let it exist as what it was, which was a man sitting at a corner table on Saturday mornings eating what his daughter made, and a woman who had built a window specifically for this quality of morning light, and both of them learning what it was like to be in the same room without either one of them managing the other. It was not resolution. Not yet. Maybe not ever, in the way resolution looks in stories. But it was something. She was learning to let something be something instead of making it into everything it wasn't yet. On a Thursday night in late August, she and Jae-min ate dinner in the kitchen of her new apartment. She'd cooked. She almost always cooked. It was the fluency she defaulted to when she wanted to say something she didn't have words for. Something simple, the kind of meal that didn't require performance. rice and vegetables and a piece of fish, and the particular satisfaction of feeding someone well in a space that was entirely yours. After dinner, he helped her wash the dishes. He was not practiced at it, and she didn't correct his technique, which she considered a significant personal growth moment. She told him about the Saturday mornings with her father. He listened, drying a bowl that was already dry because he was still learning the judgment about when a thing was done. "How does it feel?" he said. "Careful," she said. "Like the first time you use a mended thing. You don't know yet whether it held. But you're using it." "Yes," she said. "I'm using it." He set the bowl down. She turned off the water and dried her hands. Through the east-facing kitchen window, the August night had gone full dark, and the city was doing its particular nighttime version of itself, the one she'd been learning from this window for 6 weeks. "I called my mother last week," he said, "in Seoul." She looked at him. "Not her birthday," he said. "Not mine. Just a call." He looked at the window. "I don't know what it was. I don't think I know what I was doing while I was doing it. I talked to her for 12 minutes about nothing in particular, and then I said I'd call again, and I hung up and I sat with it for a while." She stood at the kitchen counter and looked at this man, this careful and private and strange man who had driven 22 minutes because she'd asked him to, who kept architectural notebooks in an open drawer, who ate breakfast now and dried dishes imperfectly in her kitchen. "What did it feel like?" she said. He thought about it. "Like using a door I'd walled over. I'd forgotten the door was there. Then I remembered it, and I wasn't sure it would open, and then it did." He paused. 12 minutes. "That's enough for the first time," she said. "Yes," he said. "I think so." She reached out and put her hand on his forearm. Not a dramatic gesture, just contact, the most ordinary kind. One person touching another person's arm in a kitchen after dinner. He looked at her hand, then he covered it with his own. They stood like that for a moment in her kitchen with the east-facing window and her grandmother's photograph on the wall, and the particular quiet of two people who had both spent a long time inside their own separate kinds of loneliness, and were learning, carefully and without rushing, what it was like on the outside of them. She was 34 years old, and she had built a bakery from a weekend cart and a paper towel recipe, and 15 years of 5 in the morning mornings, and she had sat on a stone bench in an emerald dress with a safety pin at the back, and she had called the one person she trusted, and he had come, and everything that had happened since was real, and some of it had been terrible, and some of it she was still sorting, and some of it was this, standing in her own kitchen, in her own apartment, 4 blocks from the thing she'd built, with someone's hand warm over hers. She was not rescued. She had been seen, which was different and more important, and she had finally started practicing the same skill on herself. The woman who had sat alone outside a wedding waiting to be noticed had not been saved by being noticed. She had been saved by finally understanding that she'd always been worth the noticing, and that the failure to do so had never been a reflection of her size, or her weight, or her career, or her presence in a photograph. It had been a failure of vision, and she had simply, finally, stopped waiting for people with that failure to correct it before she moved on. She had moved on. The window faced east. The morning was coming.